I am Chloe. I am 32 years old and a compliance director for a New York hedge fund. At Thanksgiving dinner, my parents told me my only job in the family was to pay while my brother played. My father pointed to the exit and said if I had a problem with it. There was the door. I did not argue. I just stood up, took my husband by the hand, and walked out. By the time my car left their driveway, I had revoked every single line of credit, keeping their fake, high society life afloat. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe walking away is the ultimate power move. The clinking of sterling silver against fine china was the only sound in the dining room of my parents' Connecticut estate. The crystal chandelier cast a warm glow over the roasted turkey, but the atmosphere felt like sitting inside a freezer. My mother, Beverly, did not bother asking how my husband Marcus and I were doing. Instead, she reached into her designer handbag and slid a glossy, poorly stapled folder across the mahogany table. It stopped right next to my wine glass. She tapped her manicured fingernail against the cover. Hunter needs $200,000 to launch his new cryptocurrency platform, she announced, her tone implying she was asking me to pass the salt. We expect you to wire the funds by Monday morning. I looked across the table at my 29-year-old brother. Hunter was swirling a glass of expensive bourbon, leaning back in his chair with a smug grin. As a compliance director, my daily routine involved identifying financial fraud and shutting down illegal market schemes. I did not even need to open the folder to know his so-called tech startup was a black hole of gambling debts and offshore liabilities. I took a slow sip of my water. I am not funding a crypto scam. Hunter, I replied, my voice steady and quiet. Find another way to pay off your bookies? The silence shattered. My father, Richard, slammed his fist onto the table. The sudden impact made the crystal wine glasses rattle. His face turned a dark shade of crimson. He leaned forward, pointing a rigid finger directly at my face. You listen to me, he growled. Your brother is a visionary. Your only job in this family is to provide the capital while he builds the legacy. You make more money than you could ever spend at that hedge fund. If you refuse to support your own blood, you do not belong at this table. If you have a problem with our rules, there is the door. I looked at the three of them. Beverly was glaring at me with undisguised contempt. Hunter was smirking, waiting for me to pull out my checkbook and surrender just like I had done throughout my entire 20s. They honestly believed they held the leverage. They thought guilt and family duty would force my hand. I placed my linen napkin neatly on the table. I stood up and retrieved my cashmere coat from the back of my chair. My husband Marcus, a brilliant African-American corporate restructuring attorney who handled bankruptcies for Fortune 500 companies, did not say a word. He simply placed his fork down, offered my father a chilling, knowing smile, and stood up beside me. We walked out of the dining room without shedding a single tear or raising our voices. The heavy oak front door clicked shut behind us, sealing them inside their own delusion. The interior of our sedan was quiet as Marcus merged onto the interstate, heading back toward Manhattan. I pulled my phone from my purse and opened my private banking portal. For 5 years, my impeccable credit score and my executive salary had served as the primary guarantor for the family empire. The luxury vehicles in their driveway, the country club memberships, the premium credit cards they flashed at expensive restaurants. All of it existed solely because my name was hidden on the underwriting documents. They had commanded me to leave. I was merely fulfilling their request to the fullest extent. My thumbs moved rapidly across the glowing screen. I systematically revoked my guarantor status on every single joint account. I canceled the authorized user privileges on the premium credit lines. I severed the financial arteries that kept their fake, aristocratic lifestyle breathing. I locked the screen and leaned my head against the leather headrest. Marcus glanced at me from the driver's seat. It is done, I told him. He nodded, keeping his eyes on the dark road ahead. 2 hours later, 1,000 miles away in a neon-lit Miami nightclub, the fallout hit its first target. Hunter was surrounded by bottle service waitresses, attempting to close out a $15,000 bar tab to impress a table of models. He casually handed the waiter his sleek metal card. The machine beeped, flashing a bright red error code. Denied. The digital clock on the nightstand shifted to 2 in the morning when the harsh vibration of my cell phone shattered the quiet darkness of our Manhattan bedroom. The screen illuminated the sleek, modern furniture, flashing an incoming call from an unknown Miami area code. I did not move immediately. I let it ring. As a compliance director handling billions in hedge fund assets, I am accustomed to late-night alerts regarding Asian market fluctuations or European regulatory audits. But the second and third consecutive calls confirmed this was not a corporate emergency. It was a domestic crisis. I slid out of the warm covers, careful not to wake Marcus, and walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering New York skyline. I swiped the green icon to accept the connection. The background noise assaulting the speaker was chaotic. A heavy bass beat thumped relentlessly, mixed with the shouting of angry voices. Then came my brother's voice. Hunter sounded entirely devoid of his usual smug arrogance. He was breathless, his words stumbling over each other in sheer panic. "Chloe, you need to call the bank right now," he pleaded, his voice cracking like a terrified teenager. I am standing in the back office of a club in South Beach. The manager is holding my ID, and they have 2 bouncers blocking the exit. My metal card keeps declining, and the tab is $15,000. They think I am trying to run a scam. They are threatening to call the Miami police. I looked down at the street traffic flowing far below my window. Hunter had flown down to Florida to celebrate a fake tech startup that had 0 actual revenue. He had ordered premium bottle service, surrounded himself with models, and assumed the invisible financial safety net would catch him just as it always did. He assumed wrong. Before I could respond to his frantic begging, a sharp click echoed on the line. Hunter had clearly merged the call in desperation, bringing our mother into the fray. Beverly did not ask what was happening. She went straight on the offensive. Her shrill voice cut through the background noise of the club. "Fix this immediately. Chloe," she commanded, her tone vibrating with toxic entitlement. "Your brother is a prominent entrepreneur. You cannot humiliate him like this in front of important investors. Call your wealth manager and unfreeze the account. You threw your little tantrum at Thanksgiving dinner, and now it is time to grow up and fulfill your obligations." I stood in the quiet calm of my apartment, feeling the cool glass of the window against my fingertips. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend my actions. In the financial sector, you never argue with a failing asset. You simply state the facts. I did not freeze the account. "Mom," I replied, my voice echoing with a chilling, detached precision. I simply contacted the underwriting department during my drive home. I removed my name as the primary guarantor on the family trust and all associated credit lines. The bank is just doing its job. The line went dead silent for a fraction of a second. Beverly let out a sharp gasp, unable to comprehend the vocabulary I was using. A primary guarantor was not a concept she had ever needed to understand, because she had spent her entire adult life spending money she did not actually possess. "You cannot do that," she snapped, panic beginning to bleed through her anger. "Your father set up those accounts. We have excellent standing with that institution. We are elite clients." I smiled into the darkness of the room. My parents operated under a dangerous delusion. They believed their sprawling Connecticut estate, the country club dinners, and the luxury vehicles parked in their driveway were a reflection of Richard's business acumen. They thought they belonged to the upper echelon of society. The brutal reality was entirely different. Richard was a man drowning in highly leveraged debt. For the past 5 years, every single piece of their aristocratic lifestyle was propped up by a singular, invisible pillar: my flawless 820 credit score. I was the silent foundation keeping their crumbling house of cards from collapsing. Banks do not lend hundreds of thousands of dollars to a man with a history of failed ventures and maxed out revolving credit. They lend money to the hedge fund executive whose spotless financial history co-signs the risk. You are not elite clients, Mom, I clarified, keeping my delivery surgical and direct. You are high-risk liabilities. Without my credit profile shielding his accounts, Dad is just a man with a dangerous debt-to-income ratio. The bank algorithms have recalibrated your status. Hunter began whining in the background, begging Beverly to wire him the cash directly to appease the club manager. But Beverly was too stunned to answer him. I did not wait for her to formulate another insult or demand a rescue. I tapped the red button, severing the connection permanently. The silence returned to my penthouse, thick and satisfying. I walked back to the bed and placed the phone on the nightstand. Marcus shifted under the duvet, opening one eye to look at me. He had spent the last decade tearing apart bankrupt corporations, liquidating assets, and dealing with ruthless creditors. He knew the sound of a financial execution when he heard one. Did the first domino fall? Marcus asked, his deep voice carrying a quiet amusement. Hunter is trapped in a Miami nightclub facing fraud charges, I answered, pulling the covers back over my shoulders. And the automated systems are updating their risk assessments right now. Marcus chuckled. A rich, dark sound in the quiet room. By sunrise, Richard is going to realize he brought a knife to a drone strike. He was entirely correct. The modern banking system does not sleep, and it certainly does not care about family legacy or country club reputations. It operates on cold, hard mathematics. When an underwriter detects that a primary guarantor has withdrawn their backing from a highly leveraged portfolio, automated failsafes are triggered across the entire network. At exactly 6 in the morning, I sat at my sleek marble kitchen island with a cup of black espresso. My laptop was open, displaying the secure dashboard of the financial institution where my family held their accounts. Because my name had been deeply embedded in the account history, I received the automated courtesy notifications as the final severing process completed. I watched the digital dominoes fall in real time. The algorithm initiated a comprehensive sweep of Richard's financial profile, stripped of my executive income and spotless credit history. His true fiscal health was laid bare under the harsh light of federal banking regulations. The system calculated his revolving debt, analyzed his lack of liquid assets, and instantly flagged the entire portfolio as a critical default risk. A bright red notification populated my screen. It was an exact copy of the urgent email that had just been transmitted directly to my father's inbox. I took a slow sip of my espresso, savoring the bitter taste as I read the text of his impending doom. The bank had executed an immediate acceleration clause on his primary credit accounts. The email informed Richard that due to a sudden and severe deterioration of his creditworthiness, his revolving credit line was permanently suspended. But the true devastation lay in the second paragraph. The institution was demanding an immediate cure for the outstanding balance. They were calling in the debt, all of it. The email explicitly stated that Richard had exactly 7 days to submit a full payment of $150,000. If the funds did not clear the clearinghouse by the designated deadline, the bank would initiate aggressive litigation, filing a civil lawsuit to secure a judgment against his remaining physical assets. He was waking up to a financial death sentence. He had spent the previous evening pounding his fist on the dining table, arrogant and untouchable, demanding I fund his son's gambling habits. Now he was staring down the barrel of a 6-figure legal threat with absolutely zero means of defending himself. He had no cash reserves. He had no hidden safety net. He only had the crushing weight of the debt he had accumulated trying to impress people who did not care about him. Marcus walked into the kitchen wearing a tailored suit, adjusting his silk tie as he prepared for a day of corporate litigation. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter beside me. His eyes scanned the glowing screen of my laptop, reading the bank demand letter with the practiced efficiency of a restructuring attorney. 7 days to cure $150,000, Marcus noted, taking a sip of his coffee. He is going to panic. He will try to secure a high-interest bridge loan to cover the gap. But no reputable lender will touch him with those new risk metrics. He is functionally radioactive. I closed the laptop, a sense of profound clarity washing over me. He told me to leave his house if I did not want to pay for Hunter to play. I said, looking up at my husband. I am just letting him play with his own money now. Marcus smiled, setting his coffee mug down. The legal mind inside him was already moving 3 steps ahead, anticipating the chaotic moves desperate people make when cornered by creditors. He checked his watch and pulled his leather briefcase from the chair. You should keep your phone nearby today. Chloe, Marcus advised, his tone shifting into a sharp, strategic cadence. When people like your father realize the banks have cut them off, they always try to leverage their physical assets to stay afloat. He is going to look out his window at that pristine Porsche sitting in the driveway and think he can sell it to cover the margin call. I frowned slightly, tracking his logic. The Porsche was leased under the same joint structure I had just dismantled. Marcus headed toward the front door, his posture radiating quiet authority. Let us just say I made a phone call of my own last night after we got home, he added, pausing with his hand on the doorknob. When an account guarantor is removed, the asset recovery teams receive a notification. Your father has been delinquent on that vehicle lease for 3 months. I simply reminded the recovery agency that the car is no longer protected by your credit profile. The heavy door clicked shut as Marcus left for the office, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of the city outside my windows. The trap was no longer just a financial concept. It was a physical reality descending upon my parents' estate. The banks were coming for the money, and the repo teams were coming for the metal. And the morning was only just beginning. The trading floor hums with a quiet, relentless intensity. My corner office offers a panoramic view of the lower Manhattan financial district, a sprawling grid of glass and steel where leverage is the only currency that matters. I am reviewing a complex European regulatory filing when the intercom on my mahogany desk emits a sharp buzz. The head of building security, a retired detective named Sullivan, informs me of a disturbance in the main lobby. He sounds hesitant, his professional demeanor strained. He explains that a couple claiming to be my parents are threatening to contact the financial press if I do not come down immediately. I do not sigh or roll my eyes. I simply close my laptop, smooth the skirt of my tailored charcoal suit, and instruct Sullivan to hold his personnel back. I will handle this intrusion personally. The descent in the glass elevator takes exactly 40 seconds. Through the transparent shaft, the sprawling atrium of the hedge fund headquarters comes into view. The lobby is a cathedral of brushed steel and imported Italian marble, designed to project wealth and intimidate visitors. Right in the center of this sterile environment, Richard and Beverly are delivering a theatrical performance worthy of an off-Broadway stage. Beverly is weeping loudly, clutching a designer silk scarf to her chest, wailing to anyone who will listen about a heartless daughter who abandoned her family to starve. Richard paces back and forth across the polished stone, his face a furious shade of plum. He shouts at a stoic receptionist about my supposed moral bankruptcy, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. Junior analysts, seasoned portfolio managers, and visiting executives pause by the security turnstiles. Dozens of smartphones are already out, the recording lights blinking steadily across the crowd. My parents crave an audience. They thrive on spectacle, genuinely believing that public shame will force my compliance. They forget that in the ruthless world of high finance, a public meltdown only destroys the person doing the screaming. The elevator doors slide open with a soft chime. I step out, my heels clicking a steady, metronomic rhythm against the marble floor. Sullivan and 2 burly security guards move to intercept my parents. But I raise a single hand. The gesture is small but carries undeniable authority. The guards step back, melting into the perimeter of the room. I walk toward the center of the atrium, stopping exactly 5 feet away from the chaos. Beverly spots me first. She drops the weeping mother facade for a fraction of a second, her eyes flashing with pure, concentrated venom. before quickly resuming her tragic act for the surrounding cameras. Richard lunges forward, though he stops just short of entering my personal space. He points a trembling finger directly at my face. "You are going to fix this right now," he snarls, spittle flying from his lips. "You froze our accounts. You locked the credit cards. Do you have any idea the humiliation we faced this morning at the club? We are your flesh and blood, and you treat us like garbage. Fix the bank error before I tell everyone in this building exactly what kind of ruthless sociopath they are working with." I keep my posture perfectly rigid. I do not cross my arms or break eye contact. I let his words hang in the heavy air, allowing the dozens of recording devices to capture every single threat. "You are trespassing in a private commercial building." "Richard," I reply, keeping my volume low, forcing the onlookers to quiet down just to hear me. "There is no bank error. You leveraged yourselves into a corner, and the financial safety net is gone. You came here to extort a compliance director in front of her colleagues, hoping a scene would make me open my checkbook. It will not work." Before Richard can launch into another escalating tirade, the heavy revolving doors at the entrance spin rapidly. Marcus strides into the lobby. He wears a bespoke navy pinstripe suit, carrying a slim leather briefcase in his right hand. He moves with the predatory grace of a man who spends his life dismantling bloated corporations in federal bankruptcy courts. The crowd parts for him naturally. Sensing the shift in the room's dynamic, he stops beside me, resting a reassuring, firm hand on the small of my back. He looks at my parents, not with anger, but with the cold, calculating gaze of a prosecuting attorney examining a hostile, unpredictable witness. Richard puffs his chest out, trying desperately to regain the alpha position. "Look who decided to show up." Richard sneers, his voice dripping with condescension. "The lawyer. Are you here to threaten us?" "Marcus, we are exercising our right to free speech. We have a right to demand answers from our daughter." Marcus offers a thin, razor-sharp smile. He unclasps his briefcase, retrieving a pristine manila envelope. "Free speech does not cover corporate extortion," Marcus states, his baritone voice slicing through the lingering tension. "You are currently creating a hostile disturbance inside the headquarters of a federally regulated financial institution. Under New York corporate harassment statutes, the security team here has every right to detain you for criminal trespass and disturbing the peace. I suggest you lower your voices and consider your next move very carefully." Beverly scoffs, stepping forward to challenge him, her face flushed with indignation. "You cannot arrest us. We are family. We just want what is rightfully ours. Hunter needs his funding." Marcus extends his arm, holding the manila envelope out to Richard. "We are not here to arrest you, Beverly. We are here to deliver a formal notification." Richard hesitates, then snatches the envelope from Marcus. He tears it open, expecting a restraining order or a cease and desist letter. His eyes dart across the dense, legal jargon printed on the thick parchment. As he reads the formal text, the color drains rapidly from his face, leaving him looking like a hollow shell. "What is this?" Richard whispers, his blustering bravado evaporating into the cold, air-conditioned environment. Marcus buttons his suit jacket, his expression unyielding. "That is a civil notice of repossession," he explains smoothly. "You see, while you two were driving down the Merritt Parkway this morning to stage this little theatrical performance, you left your driveway unguarded. I mentioned earlier that I made a phone call to the Asset Recovery Agency regarding the delinquent lease on Hunter's vehicle. They were very grateful for the updated risk assessment." Richard stares at Marcus, his jaw going slack. He looks down at the paper, then back up, unable to process the swift, brutal execution of the law. "You took the car," Beverly shrieks, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "You sent thugs to steal my son's car." Marcus shakes his head, correcting her with lethal precision. "No, Beverly, we did not steal anything. The bank reclaimed their property because you failed to make the required payments for 90 consecutive days. The tow truck secured the vehicle exactly 20 minutes ago. It is already sitting in an impound lot in Queens. You came here hoping to create a distraction and bully Chloe into submission. Instead, you handed us the perfect window of opportunity to execute a lawful repossession without any neighborhood drama. The profound irony of the situation paralyzes them both. They had dressed in their finest country club attire and traveled all the way to Wall Street to publicly shame me, only to be outmaneuvered and humiliated themselves. The junior analysts recording the scene capture every agonizing second of their defeat. Richard grips the notice, his hands shaking visibly. His grand plan to intimidate me has backfired with devastating consequences. Suddenly, his phone begins to vibrate in his jacket pocket. A relentless, frantic buzzing that cuts through the quiet lobby. He pulls the device out, staring blankly at the glowing screen. The caller identification flashes Hunter's name. The golden boy has just woken up from his Miami bender. Walking out to the street to discover his prized possession is missing. Richard looks at me, his eyes wide with a frantic, desperate realization that the rules of the game have permanently changed. The financial shield is gone, and the predators are officially circling their estate. The illusion of their wealth has shattered right in front of the very people they wanted to impress. I turn my back on them, stepping toward the open elevator doors. Enjoy the train ride back to Connecticut, I say over my shoulder, my voice echoing in the marble hall. And tell Hunter to check his credit score. As the glass doors slide shut, cutting off the sound of my mother's hysterical weeping, my own phone vibrates with a high-priority notification. It is an alert from a digital tracking tool I use for ongoing risk assessment. Hunter has not just discovered the missing car. He has decided to broadcast his retaliation to the entire world. In his reckless, drug-fueled rage, he is turning on his camera, ready to spin a web of lies. He thinks he is launching a public relations war to destroy my reputation. He has no idea he is about to hand me the digital keys to a federal indictment. The elevator ride back to my corner office is quiet. My phone hums against my palm. I expect an angry text from my mother or another desperate threat from my father following their humiliating exit from the lobby. Instead, I find a priority alert from a digital brand monitoring software I keep active for our hedge fund. The algorithm flags any mention of my name or my firm across major social media platforms to protect our corporate reputation. Hunter has decided to go live. I step into my office and lock the heavy glass door. I bypass my phone and pull up the broadcast directly on my primary desktop monitor. Hunter is standing in his rented Miami condominium. The bright Florida sunlight streams through his floor-to-ceiling windows, but it does not hide his haggard appearance. He looks disheveled. His designer shirt is wrinkled and his eyes are bloodshot from a night of panic and substance abuse. He is holding the camera too close to his face, playing the role of the devastated victim. He stares into the lens and forces a tear to roll down his cheek. He tells his thousands of followers a heartbreaking tale. He claims his greedy corporate sister has hijacked their elderly parents' retirement accounts. He paints me as a ruthless Wall Street villain who is stealing from her own family to fund a lavish lifestyle while leaving our mother and father destitute. He begs his audience to share the video, hoping the internet mob will descend upon my firm and force me to surrender. He wants to leverage public outrage to unlock his credit cards and retrieve his repossessed sports car. It is a desperate theatrical performance. He thinks he is orchestrating a public relations nightmare. He does not realize he is handing a financial investigator a loaded weapon. I lean back in my ergonomic chair and watch the broadcast play out. I do not feel a shred of anxiety. Public opinion is a fickle, fragile thing, but financial data is permanent. I let the video run, analyzing his background rather than listening to his lies. Hunter paces back and forth across his living room, waving his free hand to emphasize his fake tragedy. As he pivots near his kitchen island, the camera lens pans past his home office setup. I sit forward. My finger hovers over the keyboard. I tap the spacebar, freezing the frame. I cast the paused video from my desktop to the large high-definition smartboard mounted on my office wall. I isolate the specific section of the background and apply an enhancement filter to sharpen the pixels. Hunter left his dual monitors turned on. To a casual viewer, it just looks like complex financial charts. It looks like the workstation of a busy tech entrepreneur. But I am a compliance director. I spend 60 hours a week hunting for anomalies in global trading patterns and mitigating institutional risk. I do not see charts. I see the raw, unencrypted interface of a cryptocurrency clearinghouse sitting right next to an offshore sports betting ledger. I stand up and walk toward the smartboard, tracing the visible data lines with my eyes. I can read the incoming transaction logs displayed on his left monitor. They are small, consistent deposits. $500 here, $2,000 there. The sender names are hidden, but the wallet hashes are visible. These are retail investors. These are everyday people pouring their savings into his fake technology startup, expecting a legitimate return on investment. Then I look at the right monitor. The outgoing transfer log is a glaring neon sign of criminal activity. The incoming retail funds do not sit in a secure development account. They are not allocated for software engineering or marketing or payroll. The moment the deposits clear the holding wallet, they are swept out via automated smart contracts. The destination hashes match known unregulated gambling syndicates in the Caribbean and Eastern Europe. Hunter is not running a failed business. He is operating a textbook Ponzi scheme. He is taking new investor capital and funneling it directly into his offshore poker habits, using a fraction of the incoming cash to pay fake dividends to early backers just to keep the illusion alive. A normal person would pick up the phone and call the police. But I am not a normal person. If I alert the authorities right now, the ensuing investigation will be chaotic. The federal agents will freeze everything associated with his name, and the collateral damage might inadvertently tangle my own corporate accounts if our parents try to drag me down with them to save their golden child. I need to map the entire blast radius before I drop the match. I need to know exactly how deep this rot goes. I return to my desk and launch a proprietary tracing software used by our internal forensic department. I input the visible alphanumeric wallet addresses from the frozen video frame. The software begins indexing the blockchain, searching the public ledger for the transaction history. I watch the digital map populate on my screen, connecting the nodes of Hunter's illicit empire. A Ponzi scheme requires a catalyst. It requires initial seed capital to launch the marketing campaign and pay the very first wave of investors to create a false track record of success. Hunter had no liquid cash of his own. He lived entirely on my credit. So, where did he get the initial liquidity pool? I command the software to trace the blockchain back to its genesis block. I sift through thousands of microtransactions, peeling back the layers of digital obfuscation. The algorithm identifies a massive bulk deposit made exactly 4 months ago. It is a clean wire transfer of $300,000, converted into digital currency through a domestic exchange. I isolate the routing number of the originating bank. The data indicates a regional financial institution based in Connecticut. It is the exact bank branch where my father Richard has maintained his checking account for 30 years. The pieces of the puzzle snap together with chilling clarity. Hunter did not build this trap alone. Richard bankrolled it. I minimize the tracing software and open a secure portal connected to the municipal property registry for my parents' county. If Richard wired $300,000 to his son, he did not find it in his savings account. I know his financial profile intimately. He has zero liquid assets. There is only one place he could have sourced that kind of capital. I type the parcel identification number for the sprawling Connecticut estate where we just shared our Thanksgiving dinner. The county database loads the property history. The screen displays the original deed, the property tax assessments, and the historical lien records. I scroll down to the most recent filings. There it is. A brand new recorded lien sits glaringly on the digital ledger. Exactly 4 months ago, coinciding perfectly with the genesis deposit of Hunter's Ponzi scheme, Richard executed a cash-out refinance. He leveraged the roof over their heads, drawing out hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity. The underwriting details indicate a high-interest subprime loan structure, confirming my suspicion that traditional lenders refused to touch his application. He bet his entire retirement and his primary residence on a degenerate gambler. He mortgaged his home to fund a federal crime. I stare at the digital deed, feeling a cold, predatory focus sharpen my mind. Richard and Beverly are currently riding a train back to a house that is essentially owned by a predatory lending institution. They think their biggest problem is a repossessed sports car and a canceled credit card. They have no idea they are sitting on top of a federal wire fraud conspiracy that is actively unraveling in a Miami condominium. But as I read the fine print of the recorded mortgage agreement, a specific detail catches my eye. I lean closer to the monitor, my eyes scanning the granular legal text buried in the appendix of the filing. The name listed on the original title of the estate does not match the signature on the new loan origination documents. The chain of custody for the property deed is fractured. The house was never entirely theirs to leverage. The property is anchored to a familial trust. I pull up the archival records from the county clerk, extracting the original trust formation documents filed over a decade ago. I scan the beneficiary clauses, the asset allocation parameters, and the executor signatures. I cross-reference the names against the current mortgage filing. The audacity of my father's actions transcends mere financial desperation. He did not just take out a bad loan against his own asset. He bypassed a legal firewall. He committed an act of staggering legal forgery to circumvent the trust restrictions. The true nature of the collateral they surrendered exposes a secret so dark it changes the entire landscape of this war. I reach for my phone to call Marcus. The legal implications of what I am looking at will mandate an entirely new strategy. My father has handed me the exact mechanism required to strip him of his freedom. I press the speed dial for Marcus. He answers on the first ring. I do not bother with pleasantries or greetings. I tell him to cancel his afternoon meetings and clear his desk because we have a fatal discrepancy in the Connecticut property title. I hear the crisp rustle of paper on his end as he instantly shifts from corporate executive into combat mode. I explain the timeline of the subprime loan and the fractured chain of custody I just uncovered on the blockchain. Marcus tells me he will meet me at his law firm at sunset. I end the call and turn my attention back to the glowing monitors in my office. The air conditioning hums a steady rhythm as I dive past the county clerk records and tap directly into the federal property registry. I pull the foundational documents of the estate. The sprawling house in Connecticut was never entirely theirs. It was anchored by an ironclad generation, skipping trust established by my late grandmother. She was a deeply pragmatic woman who saw right through my father's reckless ambition and my mother's obsession with social status. The trust clearly stipulated that the estate would remain protected until my 30th birthday, when I would legally assume the role of primary executor and sole beneficiary. The architectural design of the fund was meant to shield the family home from my father's inevitable bankruptcy. I am 32 years old now. I never received a single notification regarding my inheritance. I run a deep query for the transfer of executor rights. The database produces a digitized legal document dated exactly 24 months ago. I open the file and stare at the screen. The document claims I voluntarily surrendered my beneficiary status and transferred total unencumbered control of the trust back to Richard. At the bottom of the final page rests my digital signature alongside a certified electronic notary stamp. My eyes trace the curves of the digital ink. I cross-reference my own corporate travel logs from that exact date. 2 years ago, on that specific Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting on a red-eye flight to London for a hedge fund compliance audit without access to a secure wireless network. I never signed that document. My father stole my identity the very moment I came of age. I bypass the surface-level PDF and extract the embedded metadata. Digital signatures carry invisible fingerprints that amateur criminals always overlook. The data reveals the exact Internet Protocol address used to authorize the transfer. I run a geolocation script and pinpoint the origin. The signature was executed from the broadband router installed in the library of my parents' Connecticut home. Richard did not just mismanage his finances. He committed aggravated identity theft and felony forgery to hijack my grandmother's legacy. He used his stolen authority to drain the Phantom Trust. He liquidated hundreds of thousands of dollars in protected municipal bonds and blue-chip equities, utilizing the capital to lease his country club memberships and maintain the illusion of extreme wealth. When the liquid cash ran dry, he used his illicit control of the deed to leverage the subprime loan for Hunter's scheme. Any lingering trace of daughterly affection evaporates into the cold air of my office. The realization does not bring tears. It brings a chilling, crystalline focus. My father robbed my future to fund a criminal enterprise for a son who is currently drinking himself into a stupor in Miami. The familial bond is officially dead. I do not feel anger. I feel the mechanical drive of a forensic investigator who has just uncovered the final piece of evidence. The sun dips below the Hudson River, painting the Manhattan skyline in stark shades of gray. I leave my hedge fund headquarters and take a town car to the corporate law firm where Marcus is a senior partner. The glass building is quiet, empty of the daytime associates. I ride the elevator to the 42nd floor. Marcus is waiting in his corner office, his suit jacket draped over a leather chair and his sleeves rolled up to the elbows. I walk in and drop my laptop onto his expansive glass desk. I project the forged trust documents onto his wall monitor. I do not need to explain the mechanics of the crime. Marcus reads the metadata and the routing numbers with the predatory gaze of a man who dismantles fraudulent empires for a living. This is not just a civil property dispute, Marcus states, his voice low and dangerous. This is a severe violation of the federal tax code. When he drained the trust, he failed to file the mandatory tax distributions. He washed the stolen assets through his personal accounts to evade capital gains. We sit side by side in the dim light of his office, operating in perfect lethal synchronicity. We do not discuss confronting my parents. A confrontation gives the target time to hide their assets, destroy hard drives, and hire defense attorneys. We are going to bypass a family argument and go straight for a federal execution. I handle the financial tracing. I compile a pristine, unassailable spreadsheet mapping the stolen trust funds. I track every single dollar Richard siphoned, highlighting the exact moment the money was diverted into his personal checking accounts and subsequently wired to Hunter's offshore gambling platforms. I package the Internet Protocol logs proving the digital forgery was executed from his home network. I build a chronological timeline that eliminates any possibility of a clerical error. Marcus handles the legal framework. He drafts a comprehensive whistleblower report citing specific violations of the United States federal tax code and statutory wire fraud. He structures the dossier not as a personal grievance, but as an executive-level risk assessment. His legal prose is sharp, devoid of emotion, and brutally precise. He builds a cage of legal precedent, citing statutes that carry mandatory minimum prison sentences. He ensures no defense lawyer will ever dismantle this narrative. The synergy between a compliance director and a restructuring attorney creates a flawless weapon. We work through the night, the only sound in the office being the rapid clacking of our keyboards and the occasional rustle of printed documents. We share a single cup of black coffee, passing it back and forth without breaking our concentration. We are engineering the total annihilation of my parents' fraudulent reality. By 4 a.m, the dossier is complete. It is a masterpiece of criminal prosecution. I encrypt the final file, compressing the financial ledgers, the forged deeds, and the tax evasion evidence into a secure digital payload. We do not send this to a local police precinct. Local authorities lack the jurisdiction and the manpower to untangle complex trust fund fraud. I open a highly restricted gateway utilized by my hedge fund to report severe international market manipulation. I route the encrypted dossier directly to the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service. I flag the submission with priority tracking codes, signaling a high flight risk and ongoing multi-state money laundering. I hover my finger over the trackpad. I look at Marcus. He offers a steady, approving nod. I press the button. The progress bar flashes across the screen, and the data vanishes into the federal network. The trap is no longer local. The federal government is now armed with undeniable proof of tax evasion, identity theft, and wire fraud. The dawn breaks over New York City, casting a pale light into the law office. I close my laptop. My parents think they are waking up to deal with a delayed credit card payment and a towed vehicle. They have no idea that the full weight of the United States government is currently processing their financial execution. 3 hours later, Richard pulls his rental car into a luxury coffee shop near his Connecticut estate, trying to maintain his daily routine despite the humiliating loss of Hunter's sports car. He walks to the counter, ordering his usual imported roast. Acting like a man who still controls his destiny, he hands his debit card to the barista, expecting a smooth transaction. The card reader emits a sharp, discordant beep. The barista tries again, but the machine refuses to process the plastic. Richard scowls, snatching the card back and pulling out his smartphone to open his mobile banking application. He intends to transfer funds from his checking account to cover the embarrassment. The application loads, but the numbers do not display. Instead, a stark white screen appears, bearing the official seal of his financial institution. A harsh block of text informs him that his personal checking accounts, his savings, and his remaining investment portfolios have been permanently frozen. The freeze is not a bank error or a standard security hold. The notice explicitly states that the lock is mandated by a direct federal injunction from the Internal Revenue Service. He stands in the middle of the coffee shop, staring at his phone. The blood drains entirely from his face. His breathing turns shallow and erratic. He cannot buy a cup of coffee. He cannot buy a train ticket. He cannot hire a lawyer. The invisible walls of a federal prison have just closed around him, and he does not even know who locked the door. Meanwhile, Beverly is sitting at home, blissfully unaware, answering a knock at her front door. She expects a delivery driver. She opens the door to find two unfamiliar women holding clipboards, ready to collect a very specific debt. The afternoon sun filtered through the pristine glass windows of the Fairfield Country Club dining room. Beverly sat at the head of a long circular table covered in crisp white linen. She wore a tailored cream boucle suit and her signature pearl necklace. She had spent 2 hours preparing for this specific luncheon. The morning had been chaotic, with Richard storming out of the house muttering about a banking error. But Beverly possessed an elite ability to compartmentalize. She ignored the warning signs. Social survival required projecting relentless prosperity. Surrounding her were 5 wives of prominent real estate developers and hedge fund managers. They sipped imported Earl Grey tea and picked at tiered trays of delicate cucumber sandwiches and miniature fruit tarts. Beverly held court, her chin raised, dominating the conversation. "Hunter is closing his seed funding round this week," Beverly announced, stirring her tea with a silver spoon. She offered a practiced, effortless smile to the women around her. The cryptocurrency platform he developed is generating incredible buzz among Silicon Valley venture capitalists. We are talking about a 7-figure valuation right out of the gate. Richard and I are just thrilled to see his genius finally recognized by the market. Vivian, a woman whose husband owned a string of luxury car dealerships, raised an immaculately groomed eyebrow. "I read the tech sector is facing a severe downturn," Vivian remarked, taking a slow sip from her porcelain cup. "It takes real stamina to secure funding in this climate. You must be very proud." Beverly waved a manicured hand, dismissing the subtle skepticism. "True innovators always find a way to thrive," she countered smoothly. "Hunter has always been exceptional. He does not operate by traditional rules." The women murmured polite agreements, their eyes scanning Beverly for any crack in the armor. In this affluent circle, wealth was a weapon and gossip was the currency. Beverly knew she had to maintain the illusion of supremacy. She signaled the waitstaff, raising her chin to command attention. "Bring us 2 bottles of the vintage Dom Perignon." Beverly instructed the head waiter, "We have a milestone to celebrate. The occasion calls for something special." The waiter nodded swiftly. Retreating to the cellar, Beverly leaned back in her plush leather chair, relishing the approving glances from her peers. She felt invincible. She was sitting at the pinnacle of suburban royalty, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch. The anxiety of Chloe cutting off the credit lines felt like a distant, irrelevant memory. Richard would handle the bank. He always did. Her only job was to secure the family reputation. An hour passed in a blur of clinking crystal flutes and hollow laughter. The champagne flowed, loosening the tight social restraints of the gathering. Beverly regaled the table with fabricated stories about Hunter's upcoming move to a penthouse in Miami. She wove a tapestry of lies so intricate she almost believed them herself. As the luncheon wound down, the head waiter approached the table. He carried a sleek, black leather folio, placing it discreetly near Beverly's elbow. The total sat just north of $3,000, a sum inflated by the premium vintage champagne and the exorbitant service charges unique to the private club. Beverly did not flinch. She reached into her quilted Chanel handbag and retrieved a heavy metal platinum credit card. She placed it onto the leather folio without bothering to glance at the itemized receipt. It was a practiced motion, an arrogant display of financial nonchalance designed to reinforce her status. The waiter took the folio and walked toward the discreet point-of-sale terminal located near the mahogany bar. Beverly returned to her conversation, laughing at a joke Sylvia made about a recent charity gala. 5 minutes ticked by. Then 10. Beverly glanced over her shoulder. The head waiter was standing by the terminal, swiping the heavy metal card a second time. A small frown creased his forehead. He picked up a polished desk phone, his eyes darting toward Beverly's table. A hot, prickly sensation crept up Beverly's neck. She forced her gaze back to her guests, maintaining a stiff, artificial smile. The delay was noticeable. The effortless rhythm of the luxury service had stumbled. And in this specific environment, any deviation from perfection invited scrutiny. The waiter finally returned to the table. He did not carry a receipt or a pen. He held the platinum card between his fingers, his posture tense and uneasy. He leaned down, lowering his voice to a discreet whisper meant only for Beverly. "I apologize, madam," the waiter murmured, his eyes fixed on the white tablecloth. "The card has been declined. The terminal is displaying a hard block restriction." Beverly felt a sudden, sharp tightening in her chest. A few of the women at the table halted their conversations, their sharp ears catching the word declined. "There must be an issue with your machine," Beverly replied, her voice tightening. She kept her tone light, attempting to brush off the embarrassment. "The bank flags large transactions, sometimes for fraud protection. It is a security feature for high net worth accounts. Just try this one." She reached into her purse again, her fingers trembling slightly. She pulled out a black corporate card, a secondary line she rarely used. She handed it to the waiter. He nodded politely and retreated to the bar. The silence at the table stretched, brittle and awkward. Vivian took a slow sip of her water, her eyes fixed on Beverly with a calculating gleam. The waiter returned much faster this time. He held the black card out, his expression shifting from apologetic to deeply uncomfortable. "Declined again, madam," he stated, his voice a fraction louder than before. "The system is rejecting the authorization outright." Beverly's stomach dropped. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead. The illusion was fracturing right in front of her most judgmental peers. She dug frantically into her wallet, pulling out a third card, a standard gold visa. Her movements lost all trace of elegance. She shoved the plastic toward the waiter. "Run it manually," she hissed, discarding her polite facade. "Type the numbers in. The magnetic strip is probably damaged." The waiter hesitated, looking over his shoulder toward the main office. "Madam, the terminal is displaying an alert code I am not authorized to override. I need to ask the general manager to assist." Before the waiter could step away, the heavy oak doors of the administrative office swung open. Mr. Kensington, the general manager of the country club, stepped into the dining room. He was a tall, immaculate man who had managed the egos of the wealthy elite for 2 decades. He did not walk with his usual welcoming stride. His steps were measured, formal, and grim. He approached the table, dismissing the waiter with a subtle nod. The entire dining room seemed to lower its volume, the ambient noise fading as patrons sensed an impending spectacle. Mr. Kensington stopped beside Beverly's chair. He did not lean down to whisper. He stood straight, his voice calm, clear, and perfectly audible to every single woman sitting at the table. Mrs. Sterling. Mr. Kensington began, his tone devoid of its usual warmth. I was just notified by our accounting department regarding the terminal errors. I am afraid we cannot process any further transactions under your name. Beverly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. She tried to summon her righteous indignation, puffing her chest out to intimidate the manager. "This is outrageous," she demanded, her voice shaking. "I have been a member here for 10 years. You are humiliating me over a simple banking glitch. I will have your job for this." Mr. Kensington did not blink. He held a printed piece of paper in his hands, glancing down at it before meeting her furious gaze. "This is not a banking glitch, Mrs. Sterling," he replied smoothly, delivering the fatal blow with surgical precision. 10 minutes ago, our corporate office received an automated bulletin from the Federal Banking Registry. Your family accounts are not merely frozen. They have been seized. We received direct notification that your financial portfolio is currently under an active investigation by the Internal Revenue Service. The words hung in the dining room like shattered glass. Internal Revenue Service. Seized. Federal investigation. Mr. Kensington continued, sealing her fate. Furthermore, a review of your club ledger shows your membership dues are 90 days delinquent. Per our bylaws, your access privileges are suspended effectively immediately. I must ask you to settle this outstanding invoice with cash or a certified cashier check by tomorrow morning. Until then, you are requested to leave the premises. The silence that followed was suffocating. Beverly looked around the table. The women she had spent years trying to impress were reacting with visceral, unfiltered horror. Vivian pushed her chair back, creating physical distance between herself and Beverly. Sylvia grabbed her designer purse, her eyes wide with shock and disgust. They looked at her not as a peer, but as a dangerous liability. In their world, financial ruin was a contagious disease. Being associated with a federal tax investigation was social suicide. Beverly opened her mouth to speak, to offer an excuse, to spin a lie about a misunderstanding. But her throat was dry. The crushing weight of the exposure paralyzed her vocal cords. She had spent decades building a fortress of lies, and Chloe had just demolished the entire structure with a few keystrokes. I will need you to exit through the front lobby. Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Kensington instructed, gesturing toward the doors. Beverly did not look at her friends. She could not bear to see the judgment etched into their features. She snatched her quilted handbag from the table, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. She turned and fled. She marched across the dining room, her heels clicking erratically against the polished floor. Her vision blurred. The whispers of the surrounding patrons chased her down the hallway. She heard the hushed, mocking tones, the undeniable sound of her reputation disintegrating into ash. She pushed through the heavy brass doors of the club entrance, stumbling out into the blinding afternoon sun. The heat felt oppressive. She hurried toward the valet stand, desperate to hide inside her vehicle. She handed her ticket to the attendant, gasping for air, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. As she stood on the pavement, humiliated and stripped of her identity, her cell phone vibrated rapidly inside her purse. She yanked the device out, hoping Richard was calling to tell her he had fixed the problem, hoping he had found a loophole to save them from this waking nightmare. The screen did not display a call from her husband. It showed a frantic string of text messages from Hunter. Beverly unlocked the screen, her eyes scanning the incoming alerts. The words on the display forced the air out of her lungs, shifting her reality from a crisis of social embarrassment to a state of raw, physical terror. Mom, pick up the phone. Where is the money? The cards are dead. They found me. Beverly stared at the glowing text, a cold dread washing over her skin. Before she could type a reply, a photograph loaded into the message thread. It was an image taken from inside Hunter's rented Miami condominium. The floor-to-ceiling glass doors leading to his balcony were entirely shattered. Shards of broken glass littered the expensive hardwood floor. Standing in the center of his living room, captured in blurry, frantic motion, were three towering men covered in heavy tattoos. One of them was holding a steel baseball bat. The final text message popped onto the screen, carrying the weight of a death sentence. They say Dad guaranteed the loan for the startup. They want $500,000 by tonight, or they are going to break my legs. Help me? Beverly stood paralyzed on the sun-baked pavement. The valet pulled her car up to the curb, but she could not move. The elite country club behind her was gone. The bank accounts were seized. The federal government was hunting her husband. And now, a criminal syndicate was standing inside her son's living room, demanding a debt she had absolutely no way to pay. The invisible shield of their wealth was gone, leaving them exposed to the monsters lurking in the dark. Hunter did not stay in Miami to explain himself to the men wielding baseball bats. He ran, fleeing through the service stairwell of his rented condominium. He scrambled out into the humid night air, abandoning his luggage, his expensive watches, and his entire fabricated persona. He maxed out the final functioning debit card he had tucked away in his wallet just to secure a middle seat on a red-eye flight back to New York. The vibrant neon lights of South Beach were quickly replaced by the cold, biting wind of the Northeast Corridor. He was a fugitive from his own illusion. The cryptocurrency investors were already flooding his inbox with severe legal threats over missed dividend payments. That was merely a civil problem. The men who shattered his glass balcony doors were a mortal one. While sitting in the cramped airplane cabin, his burner phone buzzed against his thigh. It was not a text message demanding a polite repayment schedule. Loan sharks operating out of Brooklyn shadow corporations do not send invoices. They sent a video file. Hunter tapped the screen, his hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped the device into the aisle. The footage was shot earlier that same day. It showed Beverly pushing a shopping cart through the parking lot of a high-end grocery store back in Connecticut. The camera zoomed in on her license plate, then slowly panned up to capture the crosshairs of a digital scope settling squarely on the back of her head. A brief, chilling text followed the video. $500,000. 48 hours. Or the mother pays the tax. Desperation strips away all arrogance. The golden boy who had scoffed at my corporate career was now sprinting through the manicured lobby of my Manhattan high-rise. He bypassed the concierge desk, tailgating a wealthy resident through the secure elevator bank. He reached my floor, his chest heaving, his designer clothes stained with sweat and the grime of economy travel. He pounded his bare fists against my heavy mahogany front door. The dull, rhythmic thudding echoed down the pristine corridor, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. Inside my apartment, the security tablet mounted on the kitchen wall chimed. I stood beside the marble island, watching the high-definition live feed from the doorbell camera. Hunter looked feral. His eyes darted wildly, his knuckles raw and bleeding from hammering against the solid wood. "Chloe, open the door," he screamed, his voice cracking, thick with sheer terror. "You have to let me in. They are going to kill me. They are going to kill Mom." I did not move toward the entryway. I stood perfectly still, holding a glass of chilled mineral water. Marcus walked out of his study, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored dress shirt. He glanced at the monitor, his expression shifting into a mask of pure, clinical detachment. A restructuring attorney deals with desperate debtors every single day. He navigates the messy, chaotic fallout of ruined executives and collapsed hedge funds. He knows that opening a door to a drowning man only ensures he pulls you under the water with him. Marcus approached the foyer. He did not unlock the deadbolt. He simply pressed the intercom button on the wall panel, his deep baritone voice projecting clearly through the exterior speaker. You are trespassing on private property. Hunter, Marcus stated, his tone devoid of an ounce of sympathy. Lower your voice or building security will escort you to the precinct. Hunter stumbled backward, startled by the sudden intercom response. He looked up at the camera lens, his face twisted in absolute horror. Marcus, please, Hunter begged, pressing his palms flat against the heavy wood. You have to tell Chloe to wire me the funds. I owe money. Real money. Not bank debt. I took a bridge loan from a capital firm in Brooklyn. They are not bankers. They sent guys to Miami. They sent a video tracking my mother. I need $500,000 by tomorrow night, or they are going to murder us. Marcus kept his finger pressed firmly on the intercom button. The smart camera system was actively recording the audio and video to a secure cloud server. The digital footprint was pristine. Hunter was offering a voluntary, unsolicited confession to financial crimes and racketeering right on our doorstep, providing undeniable evidence that would stand up in any federal court. A legitimate capital firm does not send hitmen to grocery stores. Marcus replied smoothly, guiding the interrogation with the precision of a seasoned litigator extracting a deposition. Who exactly did you borrow money from? Hunter. What name is on the promissory note? Hunter was sobbing now, tears tracking through the dirt on his face. Ironclad Financial Solutions. He choked out, his chest heaving as he gasped for air. But it is a front. It is a shell company. I did not use my own social security number. I used the corporate entity Dad set up for the real estate portfolio. Dad signed the guarantee. He pledged the house as collateral. I just took the cash to keep the crypto investors quiet and cover my losses at the tables. If I default, the syndicate gets the deed to the estate, and they still break my legs for the interest. You have to save me. Chloe has the liquidity. She has to pay them. I listened to the confession from the kitchen, my grip tightening on my glass. My father had not just forged my signature to drain my grandmother's trust. He had pledged the very same stolen property to a violent criminal syndicate to secure a loan for his degenerate son. Richard had essentially handed the keys of our family legacy over to organized crime. They were drowning in a swamp of their own making, and they expected me to act as their life raft. Marcus removed his finger from the button. He turned away from the door and looked at me across the foyer. A slow, dangerous smile crept across his face. It was the kind of smile a predator displays when the prey walks willingly into a steel trap. He did not look concerned about the threat of violence. He looked victorious. I recognized the name Ironclad Financial Solutions instantly. Over the past several months, Marcus had spent long hours consulting with a former law school classmate who now operated as a senior supervisory agent within the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That specific Brooklyn syndicate was the primary target of an ongoing, highly classified federal sting operation. They were a violent organization notorious for washing illicit funds through predatory lending and hostile real estate takeovers. The federal agents knew the syndicate was dirty, but they lacked the cooperating witnesses and the paper trail to tie the financial documents directly to the extortion tactics. Hunter had just handed us the missing link on a silver platter. He provided the motive, the method, and the specific corporate entity bridging the gap between street-level violence and white-collar crime. Your brother is a fool, Marcus whispered, his eyes gleaming with intellectual victory. But he is an incredibly useful fool. He just provided recorded testimony linking a targeted federal racketeering enterprise to interstate extortion. We did not need to pay the loan sharks to save my family. We just needed to feed my family to the wolves to catch the sharks. Marcus pulled his phone from his pocket, dialing a direct, unlisted number. He was not calling building security to remove the trespasser. He was calling the federal government. The hunt had officially escalated, and the individuals demanding a ransom were about to find themselves looking down the barrel of a federal indictment. The predators had just become the prey. The intercom falls silent. Hunter has fled back into the sprawling Manhattan night, realizing the heavy mahogany door will never open to grant him shelter. Marcus stands near the entryway, his phone secured in his pocket after alerting his federal contacts. The foyer is quiet, but the tranquility is an illusion. We are standing at the epicenter of a financial earthquake. Before I can turn off the security monitor, my personal cell phone illuminates on the marble kitchen island. The screen displays an incoming call from an unlisted Brooklyn area code. I know exactly who is dialing. Organized crime syndicates operating disguised lending firms always perform due diligence on their collateral. They ran a background check on the forged property deed my father submitted. They found the primary asset connected to the estate. They found me. I pick up the device. I swipe the screen and tap the speaker icon, placing the phone back down on the cool marble surface. I do not offer a polite greeting. A heavy, gravelly voice fills the quiet space of my penthouse. The caller introduces himself as a managing partner at Ironclad Financial Solutions. He bypasses standard debt collection protocols and moves straight to raw extortion. He informs me his organization holds the physical promissory notes bearing my forged digital signature. He outlines his plan with a brutal, practiced rhythm. He threatens to leak the fraudulent real estate documents to prominent financial news outlets by dawn. He claims a front-page scandal involving a hedge fund compliance director tangled in a subprime forgery ring will trigger an immediate corporate inquiry. He promises my career will be reduced to ashes before lunch if I do not wire $500,000 to settle my brother's debt. He thinks he is talking to a vulnerable target. He pictures a terrified mid-level office worker willing to drain her retirement accounts to protect her corporate reputation. He assumes a simple threat from a street-level enforcer will secure a swift, effortless payout. He is profoundly mistaken. I pull my laptop closer. My fingers glide across the mechanical keyboard. The crisp clicking sound provides a steady, rhythmic beat against his ongoing monologue. I access the proprietary auditing software I use to dismantle global trading irregularities. In the financial sector, compliance directors do not just file paperwork. We hunt illicit money. We track hidden liabilities. We destroy risks. I interrupt his monologue. My tone is light, laced with icy amusement. I ask him if he genuinely believes a woman who regulates billions of dollars in hedge fund capital leaves her own digital perimeter unsecured. The gravelly voice on the other end hesitates. Confused by my lack of panic, I do not wait for his response. I read aloud the hidden employer identification number buried behind Ironclad Financial Solutions. I hear his breathing hitch over the speaker. I continue my recitation. I read the routing sequence, mapping their illicit cash flow from the Brooklyn storefront directly to a dormant treasury vault located in the Cayman Islands. The silence on the line grows heavy, thick with sudden tension. I list the 3 specific ghost corporations they use to wash their predatory loans: Blue Ridge Logistics, Vanguard Horizon, Summit Holdings. I detail the exact transaction volume moving through those entities over the past fiscal quarter. I explain how they layer the extorted funds through fake real estate holding companies to evade federal taxation. The man who just threatened to destroy my life realizes he has inadvertently dialed a financial executioner. He has brought a street-level threat to a corporate warfare specialist. I deliver my terms. I keep my delivery surgical and direct. I inform him the Federal Bureau of Investigation is already tracking his syndicate's activities. I explain that an encrypted file containing their entire offshore money laundering network is currently sitting on my desktop. I state clearly that if he or any member of his organization steps within a 1-mile radius of my building, that dossier transmits directly to the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network in under 3 minutes. I add that contacting my phone again will trigger the same automated release. He does not curse. He does not offer a counteroffer or attempt to salvage his intimidation tactic. The line simply clicks and disconnects. The call drops, leaving the dial tone echoing in the kitchen. Marcus walks over to the island, pouring himself a fresh glass of mineral water. He rests his hands on the counter, his sharp legal mind analyzing the shift in the battlefield. Cornered predators always hunt the weakest prey available. Marcus notes, taking a slow sip. The loan sharks know they cannot breach your fortress. They realize you are a lethal liability to their entire operation. They will drop you as a target immediately. But a syndicate never forgives a debt. They must pivot. They will redirect every ounce of their hostile pressure back toward the architects of this mess. He is correct. The syndicate operates on fear and consequence. They realize Hunter is a penniless addict running loose in the city, incapable of producing real capital. But Richard is a different story. Richard is the patriarch who signed the guarantee. Richard is sitting in a sprawling Connecticut estate, freshly locked out of his bank accounts, desperately trying to maintain a facade of wealth. The loan sharks will bypass the useless son and go straight for the father. They will bring the terror directly to his doorstep. The night passes with a tense, quiet anticipation. The digital traps we set are working flawlessly, suffocating my family from every possible angle. The federal tax authorities hold their bank accounts. The repossession agencies hold their vehicles. And now, a criminal syndicate is hunting them for a $500,000 ransom. The pristine suburban bubble my parents spent decades building has transformed into a high-stakes prison. They are isolated, stripped of their resources, and facing a relentless barrage of consequences. As the sun rises over the Manhattan skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and pale gray, my phone rings again. It is a new number, but I recognize the exchange. It belongs to a cheap, prepaid cellular device, the kind bought with cash at a convenience store. My father cannot use his primary line because his cellular provider suspended service due to non-payment. I swipe to accept the call. The voice on the other end is barely recognizable. Richard sounds hollow, stripped of the booming, arrogant bravado he displayed just days ago at the Thanksgiving dinner table. His breathing is ragged. The illusion of his supremacy has shattered. He whispers into the receiver, telling me that strange men parked a black sport utility vehicle at the end of his driveway at dawn. He says they left a photo of Hunter on his front porch with a target drawn over his face. The reality of his fraudulent actions has finally crashed down upon him. He begs for a meeting, pleading for a chance to negotiate a truce before the men in the black vehicle return to collect their debt. The man who told me to walk out the door is now begging me to save his life. The voice on the prepaid cellular device sounded nothing like the man who had raised me. Richard was breathless, his vocal cords strained by a night of unspeakable terror. The syndicate had delivered their warning. The invisible men tracking my mother through the grocery store parking lot shattered the last remaining fragments of his suburban illusion. He begged for a meeting. He offered a full family reconciliation, promising to make amends if I would just sit down and listen. I select a neutral battlefield. I rent a soundproof glass conference room on the 50th floor of a commercial tower in Midtown Manhattan. The space is sterile, devoid of any warmth or familial comfort. It features a long polished oak table, ergonomic leather chairs, and a sweeping view of the city skyline. I arrive early. I arrange a single manila folder and a silver fountain pen at the center of the table. When the elevator doors open, the trio that steps out is virtually unrecognizable. Richard wears a suit jacket that hangs loosely over his shoulders, the fabric wrinkled from sleeping in his clothes. Beverly hides her bloodshot eyes behind oversized sunglasses, her roots showing. The pristine salon maintenance a casualty of their frozen bank accounts. Hunter looks feral. His hands tremble with the unmistakable tremors of substance withdrawal. They shuffle into the conference room, shrinking under the harsh fluorescent lighting. I do not stand to greet them. I do not offer water or coffee. I gesture toward the empty chairs across the table. They sit down in unison, clinging to the desperate hope that seeing their physical deterioration will trigger a dormant well of daughterly compassion. Beverly removes her sunglasses, revealing dark, bruised circles under her eyes. She attempts to manufacture a tear, whispering how sorry she is for the misunderstanding at the holiday dinner. I ignore her theatrical performance. I address Richard directly. I state the facts governing their current existence. I remind him the syndicate wants $500,000 by tonight. I tell him the men in Brooklyn do not negotiate payment plans and they do not care about his seized bank accounts. Richard nods frantically. He grips the edge of the oak table. His knuckles pale. He admits they are out of time. He pleads with me to wire the funds, promising to pay me back the moment his investments clear. He still clings to the delusion that his financial ruin is merely a temporary cash flow issue. I slide the manila folder across the smooth wooden surface. I tell them I am willing to settle the debt with the syndicate today. I watch their faces light up with profound, pathetic relief. Beverly exhales a shaky breath, whispering a prayer of gratitude. But I hold up a single finger, halting their premature celebration. I inform them there is one condition. The folder contains a formal acknowledgement of debt and a detailed ledger of their recent financial maneuvers. I explain that as a compliance director, I cannot authorize a $500,000 transfer without a paper trail documenting the origin of the liability. Richard opens the folder. His eyes scan the dense legal text. The document is incredibly specific. It outlines the exact date he forged my electronic signature to hijack my grandmother's trust fund. It details the exact amount of equity he illegally extracted from the property. The second section focuses on Hunter. It explicitly describes his cryptocurrency venture as a fraudulent enterprise, detailing how he diverted retail investor capital into offshore gambling syndicates. Richard reads the clauses, his initial relief warring with his innate pride. He looks across the table, his signature arrogance bubbling back to the surface. He thinks he understands my strategy. He assumes I am merely protecting my corporate license by forcing them to sign a non-disclosure agreement. He believes a private contract between family members holds no weight in a criminal court. He lets out a dry, condescending scoff. He picks up the silver fountain pen, testing its weight. He looks at me with a patronizing smirk, mocking my reliance on paperwork. He says a printed piece of paper cannot put him in jail. But if it makes me feel better about writing the check, he will humor me. He signs his name on the designated line with a swift, careless flourish. Richard slides the document toward his son. Hunter grabs the pen. His ego, bruised by the Miami disaster and the looming threat of violence, demands validation. He wants to prove he is not just a failure. As he signs the paper, he leans forward, a desperate boast tumbling from his lips. He brags about how easy it was to spin up the fake technology white papers. He gloats about duping the retail investors, claiming they practically threw their retirement savings at him because they were too foolish to understand blockchain mechanics. He details his method of routing the money through anonymous digital wallets, seeking my professional validation for his criminal ingenuity. I let him finish his monologue. I memorize every boastful syllable. Once the ink dries on both signature lines, I reach across the table. I retrieve the document, verifying the signatures and the dates. I place the paper inside my leather briefcase and secure the brass lock. The crisp snap of the metal clasp echoes in the soundproof room. I stand up from the ergonomic chair. I button my suit jacket. Richard watches me, a greedy anticipation lighting up his exhausted features. He asks which account I am using to wire the funds to the Brooklyn syndicate. I look down at him, my expression shifting into a mask of chilling, surgical detachment. I inform him I am not wiring a single cent to anyone. I state clearly that I have zero intention of paying his ransom. The room falls dead silent. The ambient hum of the central air conditioning is the only sound. Beverly stares at me, her mouth hanging open. Richard tries to process the statement, his brain misfiring as the reality collides with his expectations. He stammers, pointing at my briefcase, reminding me of the agreement they just signed. I look at my father with the cold gaze of a predator examining a trapped asset. I explain the true nature of the document secured in my bag. I tell them it is not a private non-disclosure agreement. It is a legally binding sworn confession. I describe the parameters of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. I break down the federal statute, explaining how their coordinated efforts to defraud investors, forge property deeds, and launder money across state lines perfectly satisfy the legal requirements for a federal racketeering enterprise. I watch the blood drain from my brother's face. Hunter realizes his boastful monologue was not a display of genius. It was a verbal confession confirming his role as the architect of a Ponzi scheme. Richard clutches his chest, the arrogant smirk replaced by sheer, unadulterated terror. He realizes he just handed a compliance director the ultimate smoking gun. I did not need to spend months auditing their fragmented accounts to prove intent. They just provided the intent in writing, voluntarily signed and dated in a corporate boardroom. I pick up my briefcase and walk toward the glass door. I pause before exiting, looking back at the three strangers sitting at the oak table. I remind them the syndicate deadline expires in less than 12 hours. I inform them the federal dossier containing their signed confessions will be transmitted to the Department of Justice before sunset. They are now caught between a violent criminal organization demanding a ransom they cannot pay and a federal government preparing a racketeering indictment they cannot escape. I step out of the conference room and let the heavy glass door swing shut, sealing them inside their own self-made purgatory. I walk toward the elevators, leaving them to the wolves. But cornered animals rarely accept their fate with grace. As the elevator descends toward the lobby, my phone receives an alert. Beverly, realizing her husband and son are doomed, has suffered a complete psychological fracture, having lost her country club status, her home, and her future. She decides to ignite one final, desperate blaze. If she is going down, she intends to drag Marcus into the flames with her. She reaches out to the darkest corners of the tabloid press, preparing to launch a character assassination so vile it will force the entire city to watch our family burn. The humid air of the Diamond District hit Beverly as she stepped out of a yellow cab. Her hands shook as she clutched a velvet pouch inside her purse. She bypassed the bright, welcoming showrooms on the street level and navigated toward a dimly lit appraisal office on the third floor of an unassuming building. She unclasped her tennis bracelet. She removed the 5-carat diamond ring Richard had bought her during a fleeting real estate boom a decade ago. She placed the glittering stones on the scratched glass counter. The appraiser examined the gems through his loupe, offering her 30 cents on the dollar. She took the cash without haggling. Beverly did not use the funds to secure a defense attorney or pay the looming syndicate ransom. Desperation breeds a unique brand of venom. She took a subway to a greasy diner in Queens to meet a freelance tabloid reporter. She handed him a thick envelope of untraceable currency. She fed him a fabricated narrative designed to execute a targeted character assassination. She spun a tale of a wealthy corporate attorney dismantling a defenseless family, utilizing shady legal loopholes to seize her household assets. 2 hours later, a notification pinged on my digital brand monitor. The headline was sensational and dripping with lethal intent. The article painted my husband as a ruthless, predatory lawyer exploiting his elderly white in-laws. Beverly had deliberately woven subtle racial undertones into the narrative, attempting to weaponize the current social climate against a successful African-American corporate partner. The text accused Marcus of being an arrogant bully, utilizing his elite status to oppress a vulnerable suburban family. Beverly calculated that a high-profile New York law firm would shrink from the negative publicity. She assumed the managing partners would summon Marcus into a corner office and demand he drop his financial pressure on her family to protect the corporate brand. She expected him to cower, offer a quiet settlement, and restore their luxurious lifestyle to silence the media storm. She failed to comprehend the environment Marcus operates in. Corporate restructuring attorneys do not fear bad press. They are the grim reapers of the financial district. They revel in conflict. Marcus sat at his expansive glass desk, reading the article on his tablet. He did not frown. He did not exhibit a single ounce of anxiety. A low, rich laugh escaped his chest. He tapped his screen, forwarding the link to his senior litigation team. He viewed the tabloid piece not as a threat, but as a spectacular tactical error. Beverly just handed us the keys to her hidden vault. Marcus stated, his voice radiating cold amusement. She thinks a cheap internet blog will force a negotiation. She just committed documented malicious libel. Marcus did not issue a polite cease and desist letter. He did not engage a public relations firm to issue a denial. He orchestrated a devastating legal counteroffensive. Within 3 hours, his team drafted a comprehensive civil lawsuit citing defamation per se and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They demanded $10 million in punitive damages. But the lawsuit was merely the distraction. The true lethal strike lay in the accompanying ex parte emergency motion. Marcus utilized the published article as direct evidence of Beverly's erratic hostile behavior. He argued before a New York Supreme Court judge that the defendant was a severe flight risk, actively liquidating undisclosed assets to fund a smear campaign. He presented the digital tracing of her recent pawnshop transactions, captured via local surveillance networks. His private investigators accessed. The judge signed the emergency injunction without hesitation. The court order authorized an immediate total freeze on any remaining safe deposit boxes, secondary checking accounts, or hidden liquidity bearing Beverly's name to secure the potential defamation payout. The legal machinery moved with terrifying velocity. At the tabloid headquarters, the publisher received the electronic filing. The executives took one look at the plaintiff list. They realized they had just published a defamatory hit piece against a senior partner at one of the most formidable law firms on the Eastern Seaboard. Panic swept through their legal department. They recognized the impending litigation would bankrupt their entire media outlet before the end of the fiscal quarter. The publisher stormed into the newsroom, shouting at the freelance reporter. The article vanished from the internet in under 20 minutes. A stark error page replaced the sensational headline. The publisher issued an immediate unconditional retraction, apologizing for the unverified claims. The freelance reporter was fired on the spot and publicly disavowed. Beverly's grand media war ended before the sun even set over the Hudson River. The true collateral damage struck Beverly the following morning. Believing her media attack was gaining traction, she walked into her local bank branch in Connecticut to access her private safe deposit box. She needed to retrieve her grandmother's pearl necklace to pawn for grocery money. The bank manager met her in the lobby. He held a printed copy of the court injunction. He informed her that her box was sealed under a judicial order, and any attempt to access the vault would result in her immediate arrest for violating a civil mandate. Beverly collapsed into a waiting room chair. The final escape hatch slammed shut. Her diamonds were gone. Her public relations stunt had failed. Her hidden assets were legally imprisoned. She had tried to burn her son-in-law, and the flames had simply reversed direction, incinerating her last shred of independence. Back in the rented, unheated apartment, Richard received the news of the frozen vault. He stared at the peeling wallpaper, the gravity of their doom suffocating him. The loan sharks from Brooklyn were counting down the hours. The federal tax investigators were compiling their indictments. The bank was preparing to foreclose on the stolen estate. The walls were contracting, leaving him with zero oxygen and zero capital. A cornered predator will eventually chew off its own limb to escape a trap. Richard decided to gamble with his physical safety. He walked to the tiny closet and pulled out his last remaining bespoke tuxedo. The fabric smelled faintly of stale sweat and desperation, but he masked it with a heavy layer of imported cologne. He stood before the cracked bathroom mirror, adjusting his silk bow tie. He forced his facial muscles into a mask of affluent confidence, bearing the sheer terror gnawing at his stomach. He knew he could not generate $500,000 through traditional channels. His credit was radioactive. His reputation was toxic. He needed a naive target with deep pockets and an appetite for exclusive investments. He needed an angel investor who did not read the financial warning bulletins. Tonight, the elite titans of the city were gathering at the Plaza Hotel for the annual New York Real Estate Charity Gala. It was an exclusive invitation-only event featuring billionaires, venture capitalists, and eager philanthropists. Richard did not have an invitation. He did not have the entry fee. But he possessed decades of experience trespassing into high society circles. He planned to slip past the velvet ropes, mingle near the open bar, and pitch Hunter's fraudulent cryptocurrency platform to a wealthy widow or an arrogant tech heir. He intended to spin a fabricated tale of guaranteed returns, promising lucrative equity in exchange for an immediate discreet wire transfer. He was hunting for a savior in a room full of sharks. Richard stepped out of the dingy apartment building and hailed a taxi he could barely afford. He watched the glittering lights of Manhattan approach through the smudged window. He genuinely believed his slick charm and tailored suit could secure a miracle before midnight. He expected to walk into a lavish ballroom and identify an easy mark. He had no idea the gala was already under surveillance. He did not know his desperate infiltration was actively anticipated. He was walking straight into an immaculate, glittering slaughterhouse. The iconic facade of the Plaza Hotel looms against the dark Manhattan sky, radiating an aura of untouchable wealth. Yellow cabs and black town cars idle near the grand fountain, dropping off the most elite figures of the city. Richard steps out onto the pavement, his heart hammering a frantic, erratic rhythm against his ribs. The humid night air clings to his stale tuxedo. He takes a deep breath, inhaling the scent of exhaust and expensive perfumes lingering on the sidewalk. A moment later, another cab pulls up to the curb. Beverly steps out, looking pale and exhausted. She wears a navy silk gown she begged off a former neighbor who took pity on her tears before permanently blocking her number. The fabric hangs slightly loose around her shoulders, highlighting the physical toll of her rapid downfall. They do not exchange a greeting. They do not have tickets. They do not have an invitation. They possess only the raw, desperate instinct of cornered prey seeking a miracle. They bypass the primary security checkpoint by merging into a loud, sprawling group of foreign diplomats walking through the gilded revolving doors. The sensory impact of the grand lobby hits them instantly. The air smells of fresh gardenias and roasted truffles. Waiters in crisp uniform glide past, carrying silver trays of vintage champagne. Richard feels a sudden familiar surge of his old arrogance returning. He looks at the crystal chandeliers and the marble floors, convincing himself he still belongs in this world. He believes he can use his silver tongue to reverse the catastrophic damage of the past week. He grips Beverly's elbow, steering her toward the grand ballroom where the annual real estate charity gala is in full swing. The ballroom is a masterpiece of gilded architecture and frescoed ceilings. Hundreds of billionaires, venture capitalists, and hedge fund managers mingle over fine dining and jazz music. Richard scans the room with predatory focus. He cannot approach his former business associates. They likely already know about the frozen bank accounts and the looming tax investigation. He needs fresh blood. He needs a naive target with deep pockets and a thirst for exclusive opportunities. His eyes lock onto a woman sitting quietly in a plush velvet booth near the Grand Terrace. She is Victoria Sterling. She is the widow of the shipping magnate controlling a billion-dollar trust fund. She is famous for her staggering charitable donations and infamous for avoiding the media. She wears an understated emerald gown and a vintage diamond necklace projecting quiet generational wealth. She sits alone, sipping sparkling water, observing the crowd. To Richard, she looks like an unlocked vault holding his salvation. Richard straightens his spine, fixing a charming, persuasive smile onto his face. He nudges Beverly, signaling her to follow his lead and play the supportive, wealthy wife. They navigate through the crowd of laughing executives arriving at the velvet booth. Richard offers a slight, respectful bow, introducing himself as a senior real estate developer. He drops the names of several prominent country clubs, establishing a false sense of shared social standing. Victoria Sterling looks up. Her expression is polite but guarded. She gestures for them to sit across from her, offering a graceful nod. Beverly immediately begins showering the widow with calculated compliments, praising her philanthropic efforts. Richard wastes no time. The syndicate deadline is burning a hole in his mind. He shifts the conversation directly to business. He leans forward, resting his elbows on the polished table. He lowers his voice, adopting the confidential tone of an insider sharing a highly lucrative secret. He pitches Hunter's virtual real estate investment fund. He spins a masterful web of lies, describing a revolutionary technology platform that tokenizes commercial property. He claims the initial seed round is oversubscribed, but he is willing to carve out a special allocation for a distinguished investor like her. He talks about guaranteed quarterly dividends and unprecedented market growth. He paints a picture of effortless, untraceable wealth. He builds the illusion higher and higher, pouring all his desperate salesman energy into the performance. Then he makes the ask. He requests a quiet, unrecorded wire transfer of $1 million by midnight to secure her equity position before the public launch. Victoria Sterling does not blink. She takes a slow sip from her crystal glass, placing it softly onto a cocktail napkin. She offers a warm, encouraging smile. She acts fascinated by the concept, leaning closer to listen. She tells Richard that traditional real estate yields are becoming stagnant, and she is actively looking for alternative asset classes to diversify her trust. But then the polite widow begins to ask questions. Her inquiries are sharp, probing, and technical. She asks how the platform circumvents the Securities and Exchange Commission regulations regarding digital assets. She inquires about the specific architecture of the holding accounts and the methods used to protect investor capital from domestic tax liabilities. Richard interprets her piercing questions as genuine financial interest. He thinks he has hooked a sophisticated investor who wants assurance that her money will remain invisible to the federal government. Blinded by his towering ego and the sheer terror of the loan sharks waiting in Brooklyn, he eagerly pulls back the curtain on his entire operation. He smiles proudly, puffing out his chest. He explains that the domestic tax laws do not apply because the capital never stays on American soil. He outlines the exact structure of his network. He names the Delaware shell companies. He describes the process of washing the fiat currency through untraceable crypto exchanges. He explicitly details how the funds are swept into a secure offshore treasury in the Cayman Islands, far beyond the reach of any federal auditor. Beverly chimes in, eager to seal the deal. She boasts that her son Hunter engineered the entire routing system to ensure maximum privacy for their top-tier clients. Richard nods enthusiastically, confirming her statement. He outlines the specific daily transaction limits he uses to avoid triggering suspicious activity reports at local bank branches. He essentially hands her a verbal blueprint of a sophisticated interstate money laundering syndicate. He finishes his pitch with a triumphant grin, fully expecting Victoria to pull out her checkbook and write $1 million lifeline. He sits back in his chair, waiting for the ultimate validation of his deceptive genius. Victoria Sterling stops smiling. The warm, naive demeanor of the billionaire widow vanishes instantly. Her posture shifts, becoming rigid and remarkably commanding. The atmosphere at the velvet booth drops to a freezing temperature. She does not reach for her purse. She reaches up and gently brushes a lock of hair behind her right ear. Her index finger taps twice against a microscopic earpiece hidden deep within her ear canal. She speaks, but she is not talking to Richard. Her voice is crisp, authoritative, and laced with lethal precision. We have the explicit confession. Victoria states, looking dead into Richard's terrified eyes. He just verified the offshore routing nodes and admitted to structuring transactions to evade federal oversight. The suspect is wearing a black tuxedo, sitting in the southeast corner booth. Initiate the breach. Richard stares at her, his mind short-circuiting. The confident salesman routine shatters into 1,000,000 jagged pieces. He looks at her emerald gown and her vintage diamonds, suddenly realizing the entire persona is a flawless tactical disguise. Victoria Sterling is not a reclusive widow seeking a tax haven. She is a senior special agent operating within the white-collar crime squad of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She is the lead operative on the very task force Marcus and Chloe contacted hours ago. My husband and I had handed the agency the digital footprint. The federal team just needed the verbal confirmation to cement the racketeering charges. Richard just provided an uncoerced recorded confession to a federal agent. Beverly lets out a strangled, breathless gasp, shrinking back against the upholstery. She realizes the trap has closed. Richard tries to stand his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He intends to run to lose himself in the crowd of dancing billionaires and flee through the hotel kitchens. He takes one desperate step away from the table. The lively music of the string quartet is suddenly swallowed by a harsh, booming sound, echoing from the grand entrance. The heavy brass doors of the Plaza Ballroom are shoved open. The final sequence of their ruin is now in motion. The heavy brass doors of the Plaza Ballroom do not merely open. They are shoved apart with a concussive force that reverberates through the cavernous space. The lively jazz melody stutters. The cellist drops his bow. The music flatlines into a jarring, uncomfortable silence. Over a dozen men and women wearing dark navy windbreakers surge into the glittering hall. The bold yellow letters printed across their backs spell out the acronym of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They do not enter from a single point. They breach all 4 primary exits, simultaneously executing a flawless tactical perimeter. The coordinated movement is swift and silent, leaving zero room for escape. The city elite freeze in their tracks. Billionaires, real estate tycoons, and philanthropic widows lower their crystal flutes. The ambient hum of affluent networking evaporates, replaced by the sharp, authoritative shouts of federal agents, ordering the crowd to step back and clear a path. Outside the towering glass windows, the blinding strobe of press cameras begins to flash. Photographers press their lenses against the barricades, fighting for a clear shot. Marcus made a quiet call to the financial press earlier in the evening, ensuring this takedown occurs under the brightest possible spotlight. Richard stands paralyzed near the velvet booth. His tailored tuxedo suddenly feels like a suffocating straitjacket. He watches the tactical team part the sea of designer gowns and bespoke suits. They do not glance at the hedge fund managers or the venture capitalists. Their eyes remain locked firmly on him. The predator who thought he was hunting an easy mark suddenly realizes he is the prey. Miles away from the crystal chandeliers of Manhattan, a simultaneous execution unfolds inside a decaying rental apartment in Queens. Hunter frantically tosses designer clothing and luxury watches into a canvas duffel bag. His hands tremble uncontrollably as he reaches for the encrypted hardware wallet containing the last remnants of his stolen cryptocurrency. He intends to flee the city before the loan sharks from Brooklyn discover his location and execute their violent ultimatum. He never makes it to the hallway. A heavy steel battering ram shatters the deadbolt with a deafening crack. The wooden door splinters inward, tearing entirely off its hinges. Agents from the Criminal Investigation Division of the Internal Revenue Service flood the cramped living space. They wear heavy tactical vests and carry federal search warrants. Hunter drops his duffel bag, raising his shaking hands above his head in sheer terror. The agents ignore his frantic pleading. They swarm his makeshift home office, operating with surgical speed. They unplug the towering server racks containing the digital ledgers of his elaborate Ponzi scheme. They confiscate his dual monitors, his mobile devices, and the hardware wallets. Every single piece of equipment harboring the fake technology startup data is sealed in tamper-proof evidence bags. Hunter is shoved hard against the peeling wallpaper and handcuffed. His phantom empire is dismantled in under 3 minutes, leaving him with nothing but a pair of cold steel bracelets and the horrifying realization that his life of privilege is permanently over. Back at the Plaza Hotel, the federal agents converge on the velvet booth. Richard snaps out of his shock and lets primal instinct take over. He shoves past the cocktail table, knocking a silver tray of hors d'oeuvres onto the marble floor. He attempts to sprint toward the catering kitchen, hoping to lose himself in the labyrinth of service corridors. He manages exactly 2 desperate steps. A broad-shouldered tactical agent intercepts his path, driving a heavy shoulder directly into his chest. The impact forces the air from his lungs in a ragged gasp. Richard is lifted off his feet and driven hard against the nearest banquet table. The fine white linen tears under the sudden strain. A towering vase of white roses tips over, spilling ice-cold water and shattered glass across his flushed face. The agent twists his arm behind his back with practiced clinical efficiency. The sharp metallic ratcheting sound of handcuffs echoes sharply in the quiet ballroom, cutting through the tension. Richard groans, his cheek pressed firmly against the wet mahogany table. He is pinned beneath the weight of federal authority, in front of the exact high society audience he spent his entire life trying to impress. The elite guests stare at him with naked revulsion. He is no longer a smooth-talking developer pitching million-dollar ideas. He is a common criminal bleeding onto the tablecloth. Beverly watches her husband fall. Her mind fractures, unable to process the total destruction of her carefully curated reality. She stumbles backward, her borrowed navy silk gown catching on the heel of her shoe. She drops to her knees on the polished marble floor. The impact sends a jolt of pain up her legs, but she barely registers the sensation. She looks around the circle of horrified spectators, searching frantically for a familiar face. She spots a woman from her former country club, standing near the champagne fountain. Beverly reaches out her hand, trembling, desperate for an ally. She calls the woman's name, begging for someone to vouch for her character. She cries out that this is a misunderstanding, a terrible mistake targeting an innocent family. She insists Richard is a legitimate businessman. The country club socialite does not offer a helping hand. She takes a deliberate step backward, pulling the hem of her couture dress away to avoid any physical contact. The rest of the crowd follows suit, shrinking back to form a wide, isolating circle around the disgraced matriarch. They look at Beverly as if she carries a lethal contagion. In their world, financial fraud is an unforgivable sin. The social execution is precise and unforgiving. She is exiled right there on the floor, left to weep in the center of the room, while press cameras capture her ruin. Richard struggles against the grip of the arresting agent, twisting his neck to find a way out of the nightmare. His vision blurs from the spilled water and the flashing camera lights outside the windows. The crowd remains parted, giving him a clear, unobstructed line of sight across the grand ballroom. He looks past the agents, past the horrified billionaires, and up toward the ornate curving staircase that leads to the hotel's private mezzanine. The breath catches in his dry throat. The remaining fight drains entirely from his body. Standing at the center of the mezzanine, bathed in the soft amber glow of a wall sconce, are Chloe and Marcus. They do not hold champagne glasses. They do not mingle with the crowd. They stand shoulder to shoulder, looking down at the chaotic scene below. Marcus wears a sharp charcoal suit, his hands resting casually in his pockets, his face a mask of serene professional triumph. Chloe wears a tailored emerald dress, her posture straight, her gaze locked directly onto her father's panicked eyes. She does not smile. She does not gloat. She simply watches him bleed on the table. They look like judging deities overseeing a long-awaited reckoning. The realization hits Richard with the force of a falling anvil. The frozen accounts, the repossessed vehicles, the sudden arrival of the federal task force, the presence of the billionaire widow who elicited his confession. It was never a string of bad luck. It was a masterfully engineered sequence of traps. His own daughter orchestrated every single movement, predicting his greed and guiding him straight into the cage. The federal agent hauls Richard to his feet, gripping the collar of his ruined tuxedo. He reads the Miranda rights, his voice a steady drone that seals the end of an era. "You have the right to remain silent." The agent states loudly, ensuring the surrounding crowd hears the recitation. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Richard cannot hear the rest of the words. The ringing in his ears drowns out the noise of the ballroom. He can only stare up at the mezzanine. Chloe tilts her head slightly, acknowledging his total defeat. The silent exchange conveys a message louder than any shouted threat. She gave him the rules at Thanksgiving dinner, and now she is enforcing the penalty. She turns her back on the ballroom, walking away with her husband into the shadows of the upper floor. The pristine click of her heels fades into the distance. She leaves her father to face the flash of the cameras, the harsh grip of the tactical agents, and the cold reality of a federal prison cell. The elaborate trap has snapped shut, ending his illusion of grandeur. But the formal legal dismantling of their legacy and the ensuing courtroom battle are only just beginning to take shape across the city. The weekend transition from the Plaza Hotel to federal holding cells strips away every illusion of prestige. Monday morning breaks over Lower Manhattan with an unforgiving gray light. Inside the Daniel Patrick Moynihan United States Courthouse, the atmosphere is sterile, heavily air-conditioned, and remarkably silent. The polished mahogany benches and the elevated judge's bench command a specific type of reverence. This room does not care about country club memberships or tailored tuxedos. It operates on fax ledgers and federal statutes. The air feels heavy, carrying the weight of impending judgments. A heavy wooden door near the jury box clicks open. A federal marshal steps through, leading a line of 3 prisoners. The visual contrast from Saturday night is staggering. Richard Beverly and Hunter shuffle into the courtroom wearing identical bright orange jumpsuits. The fabric is stiff and oversized, hanging awkwardly on their frames. The metallic clinking of waist chains and wrist restraints echoes sharply across the quiet room, marking their steady march toward the defense table. Richard walks with a pronounced stoop. The confident patriarch who boasted to billionaires just 48 hours ago now refuses to lift his head. His graying hair is uncombed, and a coarse stubble shadows his jawline. He looks small-drained of the artificial authority he wielded for decades. Beverly follows him, her posture crumpled. Stripped of her expensive cosmetics, her skin looks sallow and deeply lined. The forced reality of weekend detention in a holding facility has aged her a decade. She keeps her eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding the gaze of the few spectators gathered in the gallery. Hunter brings up the rear. He is shivering, his eyes darting frantically around the cavernous room, searching for an exit that does not exist. The swagger of the tech entrepreneur has vanished, replaced by the raw terror of a cornered addict. They take their seats at the defense table. Because the Internal Revenue Service and the Federal Bureau of Investigation seized every liquid asset they possessed, they cannot afford the high-powered legal representation they once bragged about. An overworked public defender stands beside them. He shuffles a meager stack of notes, clearing his throat, as the federal judge calls the arraignment to order. The defense attorney attempts to secure their release pending trial. He argues that his clients are upstanding members of a quiet Connecticut community. He highlights their clean, prior criminal records, suggesting they pose no danger to the public and should be granted bail to prepare their defense from home. He speaks of deep community ties, familial stability, and a willingness to surrender their passports. It is a standard, desperate pitch, delivered without much conviction. The Assistant United States Attorney does not interrupt. She waits patiently for the defense to finish painting a picture of an innocent suburban family facing an unfortunate misunderstanding. Then she stands up. She does not carry a thin file. She signals a paralegal who wheels a heavy cart to the center of the floor. The cart holds multiple thick, indexed binders. The prosecutor addresses the judge. She dismantles the defense narrative with surgical precision. She presents the court with a comprehensive audit trail. She explicitly credits a senior compliance director for compiling the forensic roadmap, saving the federal task force months of investigative labor. She hands the primary binder up to the bench. She details the specific nature of the crimes, starting with the fraudulent alteration of a generation-skipping trust. She outlines the exact method used to drain protected assets through identity theft, exposing the origin of their unearned wealth. The judge turns the pages, his brow furrowing, as he reviews the undeniable digital footprint mapping the theft. The prosecutor does not stop at financial tracing. She pulls a specific manila folder from the cart. She reads aloud the sworn signed confession obtained in a Midtown conference room just days prior. She emphasizes the signatures of Richard and Hunter, acknowledging their roles in a cryptocurrency Ponzi scheme and the diversion of retail investor funds to illegal offshore gambling syndicates. She explains how the defendants willingly documented their own racketeering enterprise in an attempt to secure extortion money. To seal the argument, she introduces the audio transcript from the Plaza Hotel. She explains how Richard detailed his money laundering network directly to an undercover federal agent while actively attempting to solicit $1 million fraudulent investment. She paints a vivid picture of a family willing to leverage any asset and deceive any target to maintain an opulent lifestyle fueled by illicit capital. The judge reads the executive summary. The courtroom remains deathly still as his eyes scan the documentation. He looks down from the bench, his expression shifting from neutral observation to cold, hardened disdain. He addresses the defense table. He states that the defendants demonstrate a sophisticated knowledge of international asset concealment. He notes their willingness to forge familial identities and defraud vulnerable investors, indicates a severe ongoing threat to the community. The public defender tries to interject, mentioning electronic monitoring ankle bracelets as a compromise. The judge raises a hand, silencing the attorney instantly. He picks up his wooden gavel. He declares that the established connections to offshore banking and violent debt collectors make the defendants an extreme flight risk. They possess the knowledge to move capital across borders and the desperate motivation to flee federal jurisdiction. The gavel strikes the sounding block with a sharp, echoing crack. Bail is denied for all three defendants. They are ordered to remain in federal custody pending trial. The finality of the gavel strike shatters the last fragile layer of Hunter's sanity. The reality of pretrial detention in a maximum security facility hits him with the force of a physical blow. He collapses forward, his chained wrists hitting the defense table with a loud clatter. He begins to sob a raw, guttural wail that fills the courtroom. The sound is pathetic, echoing off the mahogany walls. He turns his head towards his parents. Tears streaming down his face. He begs Richard to do something, pleading for his father to call a wealthy friend or find a legal loophole. He cries out for Beverly to fix it, demanding she call the country club or secure a private loan to make the federal marshals go away. Richard and Beverly do not move to comfort their golden child. They stand paralyzed. Beverly stares blankly at the polished wooden table, her body trembling uncontrollably. She realizes her social standing, her pristine reputation, and her freedom are permanently erased. Richard closes his eyes, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. His shoulders sag against the weight of his bright orange uniform. They have zero answers, zero capital, and zero power. They are watching the son they sacrificed everything for, drown in a cage they built together. The illusion of their superiority has dissolved into the stark reality of federal prosecution. From the back row of the public gallery, I watch the marshals grab the defendants by their arms to escort them back to the holding cells. Marcus sits beside me, his arms crossed, his legal mind satisfied by the flawless execution of the arraignment. The formal courtroom proceedings are finished. The federal justice system has taken control. The legal punishment has officially begun. But the psychological conclusion requires one final step. The prosecutor arranged a brief, heavily monitored visitor session in the holding area before they are transferred to the correctional facility. My parents requested my presence, likely hoping to beg for a financial lifeline. They think they are walking into a negotiation. I stand up from the wooden bench, buttoning my tailored suit jacket. I am walking into the holding room to deliver the final receipt. The echo of my leather heels against the polished concrete floor of the Federal Detention Center creates a steady, rhythmic beat. The sound provides a sharp contrast to the thick, oppressive silence of the subterranean corridor. A United States Marshal guides me through a series of heavy steel security doors. Checkpoints require me to surrender my phone and briefcase, but my professional status allows me to carry a single manila folder. I step into the designated visitor room. The air smells faintly of industrial bleach and stale sweat. The environment is designed to strip away comfort and reinforce authority. It is a bleak, windowless box illuminated by harsh fluorescent lighting that casts long, unforgiving shadows. Behind a thick panel of reinforced bulletproof glass sit the three individuals who spent decades treating me like an expendable asset. They are huddled together on bolted metal stools. The bright orange fabric of their institutional uniforms washes out their skin tones, making them look sickly and frail. There are no silk ties, designer handbags, or pearl necklaces here. The aristocratic illusion they guarded so fiercely has been replaced by the grim reality of federal custody. The metallic clinking of their wrist restraints, scraping against the steel counter, serves as the only background noise. Beverly spots me first. She scrambles towards the glass, her hands pressing flat against the thick, transparent barrier. She grabs the black plastic receiver mounted on the cinder block wall. I sit down on the stainless steel chair opposite her and pick up my corresponding receiver. The audio connection crackles with static, transmitting the ragged sound of her breathing. Chloe, please, Beverly weeps. Her voice is jagged, broken by genuine terror. You have to help us. You have the money. You can hire a top-tier defense team. Marcus knows the federal judges in this city. He can make some calls and negotiate a settlement to get us out of this nightmare. I promise, everything will change. We will pay you back every single cent. We are a family. You cannot let them keep us in this awful place. She presses her forehead against the glass, smudging the surface with her tears. The vanity that defined her entire existence has vanished. She does not care about her unkempt hair or her pale complexion. She is drowning in the realization that her country club peers are currently reading about her indictment in the morning financial papers. Richard gently pries the receiver from his wife's trembling fingers. He clears his throat, attempting to summon a fraction of his former patriarchal authority. He fails. His shoulders slump under the oversized orange uniform. The confident real estate developer who boasted to billionaires at the Plaza Hotel is gone. Chloe, listen to me. Richard pleads, his tone laced with a pathetic, desperate urgency. I made a mistake. The market was shifting and I panicked. I just wanted to secure a strong financial future for all of us. The retail investors put so much pressure on Hunter to deliver rapid growth. We were just trying to survive an economic downturn. You understand complex finance better than anyone. You know how unforgiving the industry can be. Please do not let your brother rot in a cell. We can restructure the debt. I shift my gaze to Hunter. He does not even reach for the phone. He sits slumped against the far wall, staring blankly at his chained wrists. The reality of a maximum security environment has shattered his arrogant facade. He looks like a ghost haunting his own body. He finally comprehends that his digital shell games and offshore gambling habits carry inescapable physical consequences. I look at them through the smudged glass. I do not offer a reassuring nod. I do not shed a tear. My expression remains an impenetrable mask of calm, analytical focus. I hold the receiver close to my mouth, keeping my vocal delivery level and pristine. Do you remember our Thanksgiving dinner? I asked. The simple question hangs in the static of the line. Richard blinks, confused by the sudden pivot to a holiday memory. He expects a negotiation over legal fees or a lecture on morality. He does not expect a callback to the dining room table where this war officially commenced. You sat at the head of a mahogany table, drinking imported wine. I continue my words, slicing through the heavy air. You told me my only purpose in the family hierarchy was to provide capital. You looked me in the eye and said my job was to pay while Hunter plays. You pointed to the door and told me to leave if I did not like the rules. Beverly shakes her head, fresh tears spilling over her cheeks. That was just anger talking, she begs, her voice bleeding through the receiver. We did not mean it. You are our daughter. I raise a hand, silencing her frantic apologies. You meant every word. I correct her. And I respected your authority. I followed your exact instructions. I paid the bill for Hunter's games. Now I am delivering the final receipt. I open the manila folder resting on the narrow metal ledge. I pull out a single sheet of heavy legal parchment bearing the official seal of a federal bankruptcy judge. I press the document flat against the bulletproof glass, ensuring the text is perfectly legible under the harsh overhead lights. Richard leans forward, squinting to read the bold header. His breath fogs the glass. The document is an asset restitution and forfeiture order. I watch his eyes dart across the itemized ledger, tracking his sudden comprehension. I narrate the financial execution for them, breaking down the legal mechanics of their ruin. When the Internal Revenue Service seized your accounts, they placed a heavy lien on the Connecticut estate, I explain. But federal tax debts are not the only liabilities you triggered. By forging my digital signature to drain my grandmother's generation-skipping trust, you made me your primary legal creditor. You inadvertently handed me the superior claim over your remaining portfolio. My attorneys filed an emergency civil claim, attaching it directly to your federal indictment. The court recognized the documented theft. The judge authorized the immediate liquidation of your physical assets to satisfy the stolen trust funds. The house was auctioned yesterday morning to a commercial developer who plans to tear it down. The luxury sports cars were sold by the repossession agency. The country club refunded your equity share directly into a court-appointed escrow account. Every single dollar you possessed has been legally seized and routed back into a fortified trust bearing my name. I took back every cent you stole. I reclaimed it with absolute legal precision. Richard drops the plastic receiver. It dangles from its metal cord, swinging back and forth against the cinder block wall. His chest heaves as the crushing truth suffocates him. He is not just facing a lengthy prison sentence. He is returning to a world where he owns nothing. The sprawling suburban fortress he used to project his superiority has been liquidated to pay the daughter he banished. I lean closer to the glass. I know Beverly can hear my voice, echoing through the dangling receiver. I outline the parameters of their new reality, ensuring no false hope remains. Hunter is facing a mandatory minimum of 15 years in a federal penitentiary for wire fraud and operating a racketeering enterprise I state cementing their grim future. The prosecutors will not offer a plea deal. You and Mom will likely serve 8 years for aggravated identity theft and tax evasion. When you eventually secure your release, you will be elderly felons with zero credit, zero liquid assets, and a public record that prevents you from ever passing a basic background check. You will spend the rest of your lives paying off the remaining government restitution from a minimum wage paycheck. You will fade into the exact same working-class obscurity you spent decades mocking. I do not wait for a response. I place the receiver back on its cradle, cutting off the sound of Beverly's muffled screams. I gather my folder and stand up, adjusting the lapels of my tailored suit jacket. I turn my back on the viewing window, leaving them trapped in their bright orange uniforms. The heavy steel door of the visitor room closes behind me, locking them inside their concrete reality. I walk back down the subterranean corridor, the sound of my heels echoing a final triumphant beat. I retrieve my belongings from the security checkpoint and step out through the main entrance of the courthouse. The morning sun breaks through the Manhattan skyline, casting a warm, brilliant light across the bustling city streets. Marcus is waiting by the curb, holding a fresh cup of coffee and a quiet, victorious smile. The legal trap has concluded. The financial restitution is secured. But the psychological fallout of their public destruction is just beginning to ripple through the elite social circles they once desperately clawed to infiltrate, leaving a trail of ash in its wake. The changing of the seasons brings a swift and unforgiving conclusion to the legal proceedings. The autumn leaves falling across the city mirror the total collapse of the empire my parents tried to build. Financial publications and metropolitan newspapers feast on the scandal. Headlines strip away their carefully curated prestige, broadcasting the exact details of the cryptocurrency fraud and the forged estate trust to the entire eastern seaboard. The story becomes a cautionary tale of suburban greed and white-collar deception. In the insular world of elite country clubs, social execution happens with ruthless efficiency. The women who used to drink vintage champagne with my mother waste no time protecting their own reputations. They treat association with a convicted felon as a lethal contagion. I monitor the social media channels of her former friends out of pure analytical curiosity. The erasure is systemic and thorough. Vivian and Sylvia spend a single afternoon deleting every digital trace of my mother from their online profiles. Decades of gala photographs, charity committee group shots, and holiday party albums are scrubbed clean. My mother vanishes from the high society archives as if she never existed. Her phone number is blocked across their network. She becomes a ghost long before the judge even hands down the final verdicts. The sentencing hearing arrives in late November. The federal courtroom is devoid of the dramatic theatrics that characterize the initial arraignment. There are no frantic pleas or weeping displays of suburban entitlement. The reality of the federal justice system has crushed the remaining defiance out of my family. They stand before the bench wearing their institutional uniforms, looking hollow and entirely defeated. The judge addresses Hunter first. The tech entrepreneur facade is a distant memory. He stands with his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the scuffed wooden floor of the courtroom. The judge outlines the severity of the Ponzi scheme and the devastating impact on the retail investors who lost their life savings. The gavel falls, delivering a sentence of 15 years in a high-security federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Hunter does not cry this time. The terror has paralyzed his tear ducts. He simply nods, staring into the bleak abyss of a youth that will be spent behind reinforced steel and razor wire. Richard receives his judgment next. The patriarch who once believed he could outsmart the banking network and outmaneuver a compliance director faces the unyielding mathematics of federal sentencing guidelines. The judge condemns his role in forging property deeds and facilitating interstate wire fraud. He is sentenced to 8 years in a medium security facility. His posture crumbles as the sentence is read. The man who dedicated his life to chasing wealth and projecting superiority is legally branded a common thief destined to age in a concrete cell far away from the comforts he stole to maintain. Beverly stands alone for her sentencing. The prosecution acknowledged she was not the primary architect of the cryptocurrency network or the trust fund theft. However, the evidence proved her active complicity in hiding the stolen assets and enjoying the proceeds of the illicit ventures. The judge spares her a lengthy prison term, but the alternative he provides is a meticulously crafted punishment. She receives 5 years of strict federal probation, coupled with a mandatory requirement of 2,000 hours of manual community service. She is ordered to secure immediate employment to begin paying off her portion of the government restitution. The gavel strikes for the final time. The marshals lead my father and brother away through the side door. My mother is released back into a city that no longer recognizes her. The transition from an aristocrat to a probationer is a brutal, jarring descent. Stripped of the Connecticut estate and her luxury vehicles, my mother is thrust into the unforgiving reality of the working poor. The government seized her hidden safety deposit boxes and the remaining jewelry, leaving her with a meager allowance doled out by a court-appointed financial monitor. She is forced to rent a cramped studio apartment in a dilapidated public housing complex on the outskirts of the city. The sprawling manicured lawns and quiet, serene mornings of her past are replaced by the relentless noise of urban decay. The thin walls of her new building vibrate with the sounds of wailing sirens, domestic disputes, and heavy traffic. The elevator in her building is frequently broken, forcing her to climb 4 flights of concrete stairs every evening. There is no imported marble or climate-controlled comfort. Her world is reduced to peeling linoleum, cracked plaster, and the suffocating odor of stale cooking oil and damp concrete. Survival requires capital, and the terms of her probation mandate immediate labor. The woman who spent 30 years mocking the working class and sneering at service workers is forced to enter the very ecosystem she despised. Her probation officer assigns her to a janitorial position at a severely underfunded public county hospital. It is the exact medical facility she once loudly refused to visit for a minor emergency, claiming the waiting rooms were filled with undesirable elements. Her new reality is a grueling physical nightmare. Her days begin before dawn. She dons a stiff, scratchy polyester uniform and clocks in for 12-hour shifts. She pushes a heavy plastic cart filled with industrial cleaning supplies down miles of sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors. The hands that used to showcase pristine manicured nails and 5-carat diamonds are now plunged into buckets of bleach and harsh detergents. Her skin becomes cracked raw and blistered from the chemicals. She spends her afternoons emptying overflowing trash receptacles, sanitizing public restrooms, and mopping up the biological spills of the emergency ward. She works under the supervision of floor managers who do not care about her former zip code or her country club pedigree. They demand efficiency and hard labor. When she moves too slowly, her supervisors reprimand her, openly docking her meager pay if she fails to meet their rigorous standards. The physical toll on her aging body is relentless, leaving her with aching joints and a permanent stoop in her posture. But the physical exhaustion pales in comparison to the psychological torment of her weekends. Sunday represents her only day off from the grueling hospital shifts. Yet she finds no rest. Sunday is visitation day at the Federal Correctional Facility, located in the remote upstate region. The journey begins at 4 in the morning. She navigates the dark, dangerous streets of her neighborhood to reach the central transit depot. She cannot afford a taxi or a private car service. She buys a discounted ticket for a state-funded charter bus designed specifically to transport low-income families to the prison complex. She sits in the narrow, worn seat of the bus, surrounded by the very demographic she spent a lifetime feeling superior to. The bus smells of exhaust-cheap coffee and profound sadness. The heater rarely works, forcing her to shiver in her thin winter coat as the vehicle lumbers down the interstate for over 2 hours. She stares out the foggy window, watching the gray landscape roll by, trapped in a silent, isolated purgatory. Upon arriving at the prison gates, she must endure the humiliating security protocols. She empties her pockets, walks through metal detectors, and submits to invasive pat-downs by apathetic guards. She is herded into a loud, crowded visitation hall, smelling of floor wax and institutional food. She waits on a bolted metal stool, her hands resting on the cold steel counter. Eventually, a heavy door opens on the opposite side of the room. Richard and Hunter shuffle in, wearing their oversized orange jumpsuits. They take their seats on the other side of the thick, reinforced plexiglass partition. They pick up the black plastic telephone receivers. My mother picks up hers. They sit there separated by an impenetrable barrier, sharing a collective silence of profound regret. There are no grand plans to discuss. There are no startup pitches or real estate acquisitions. Hunter stares at his hands, looking older and hollowed out. Richard avoids her gaze, staring at the cinder-block wall, unable to provide any comfort or hope. Beverly looks at the two men who orchestrated their ruin. She realizes she sacrificed her daughter, her dignity, and her entire future to protect an illusion that shattered at the first sign of pressure. She spends the allotted hour listening to the background noise of the prison environment, chewing on the bitter reality of her own choices. When the guards signal the end of the visitation period, she places the receiver back on the hook. She watches her husband and son disappear back into the concrete labyrinth. She walks back to the idling transit bus in the freezing rain, preparing for the long, desolate ride back to her cramped apartment. She will wake up the next morning, put on her polyester uniform, and push her mop bucket down another hospital corridor. The cycle of poverty, isolation, and relentless regret is her permanent new existence. The empire of lies is reduced to a solitary bus ticket and aching, blistered hands leaving the stage perfectly clear for my own ascent. While my family navigates the bleak corridors of the federal justice system, the atmosphere in my world shifts into an era of unbridled clarity. The toxic debris has been swept away, creating space for a new empire built on actual substance and unyielding legal precision. My husband Marcus and I are no longer playing defense against parasitic relatives. We are standing at the threshold of a monumental professional and personal transformation. The foundation we laid during the crisis has hardened into an impenetrable fortress, preparing us to claim the ultimate victory. The corporate battlefield awaits, and we are holding all the winning cards. The federal court mandate returning my stolen trust fund did not represent a mere financial victory. It provided the exact ignition sequence for an unprecedented professional resurrection. I walked out of the courtroom with a verified legal order, restoring the wealth my father tried to siphon into his offshore gambling networks. I refused to let those funds sit dormant in a traditional savings account. I viewed that capital as the foundational bedrock for a new sovereign empire. I tendered my formal resignation to the hedge fund where I had spent years mitigating risks for other executives. I decided it was time to assess the market on my own terms. I secured a commercial lease for a premium corner office in the financial district of Manhattan. The space featured brushed steel fixtures, dark walnut desks, and towering glass walls, looking down upon the pulsing veins of Wall Street. I launched an independent risk management and forensic auditing firm. My reputation for dismantling a coordinated federal racketeering enterprise preceded me. The financial sector respects an auditor who can outsmart a cartel. Within my first quarter of operations, my client roster swelled to maximum capacity. I began consulting for elite private equity firms and international regulatory bodies. I built a team of razor-sharp analysts who mirrored my own clinical approach to data. My first major contract as an independent consultant involved a bloated technology conglomerate attempting to merge with a clean regional bank. The chief executive officer of the tech firm presented a pristine balance sheet during our initial boardroom meeting. He smiled and offered me a lukewarm coffee, expecting a rapid approval. He underestimated my forensic background. I spent 3 days running diagnostic tracing algorithms on their subsidiary holdings. I uncovered a hidden chain of bad debt funneled through overseas shell entities designed to artificially inflate their market valuation. I walked back into the boardroom, dropped the unredacted ledgers onto his glass desk, and watched his smug demeanor evaporate into a cold sweat. I killed the merger and saved the regional bank from a fatal acquisition. The banking sector whispered my name with a mixture of reverence and fear. I was no longer a silent guarantor for a parasitic family. I was the apex predator of the compliance world. I authored the rules. I set the fees. I became the exact caliber of titan my father spent his entire life failing to emulate. Marcus matched my trajectory with his own brilliant ascent. The partners at his corporate law firm recognized the sheer tactical genius he displayed while navigating the federal seizure of my parents' assets. He proved he could handle high-stakes litigation involving international money laundering and domestic extortion. He secured his senior partnership by dismantling a century-old retail corporation that had tried to hide pension funds from its retiring workforce. He hauled the corrupt board of directors into a federal bankruptcy court and systematically stripped their golden parachutes. He distributed the recovered assets back to the blue-collar workers, earning the respect of the highest judges in the district. The managing board elevated him without a single dissenting vote. His name was etched in silver lettering on the glass double doors of the executive wing. We became an untouchable force in the city. We did not inherit our influence through nepotism or fraudulent loans. We forged our status through intellect, unyielding discipline, and a mutual refusal to be exploited. The profound financial rewards of our dual enterprises allowed us to redefine our personal environment. We left our previous apartment and purchased a sprawling penthouse hanging high above the city skyline. The residence offered an unobstructed panoramic view of Central Park. The interior was a sanctuary of minimalist elegance. We furnished the space with imported Italian leather, deep mahogany accents, and pristine marble countertops. The physical elevation mirrored our psychological emancipation. There were no sudden knocks on the door from desperate siblings demanding cash. There were no late-night phone calls from a weeping mother trying to manipulate our bank accounts. The suffocating anxiety that used to poison my evenings vanished. The only sounds echoing through our home were the soft notes of a vintage jazz record and the quiet, steady rhythm of a life built on mutual respect. Yet toxic individuals always attempt one final breach of the perimeter. They refuse to accept that the bridge is burned until they smell the smoke. 6 months into our new life, a thick envelope arrived in our secure mailroom. The return address indicated a federal correctional facility in the Rust Belt. The handwriting was a jagged, desperate scrawl belonging to Richard. A prison guard likely inspected the contents before sealing it, but the intent was obvious. He was reaching out from his concrete cell, seeking a legal lifeline. He wanted Marcus to review his case for a potential appeal. He wanted me to funnel my new wealth into a high-priced defense team to challenge the sentencing guidelines. The old version of me might have felt a faint tremor of guilt. The daughter who spent her 20s trying to earn a seat at the Thanksgiving table might have opened the letter to read his excuses. But that woman died the night they told her to pay the bill or walk out the door. I picked up the envelope, holding it by the corner. I carried it into my home office. I did not break the seal. I powered on the heavy-duty micro-cut paper shredder, resting beside my desk. I fed the unopened envelope into the steel teeth. The machine whirred, devouring his pathetic pleas and reducing his last attempt at manipulation into unrecognizable strips of paper. I emptied the shredder bin into the recycling chute. The rejection was silent, permanent, and immaculate. That evening, I stand on the sprawling terrace of the penthouse. The autumn wind sweeps off the Hudson River, carrying the crisp chill of a changing season. The city below is a brilliant grid of moving lights and endless ambition. Marcus steps out onto the terrace, holding 2 crystal glasses of a rare vintage red wine. He hands me a glass, leaning comfortably against the glass railing. He does not ask about the letter. He saw the return address, and he trusts my judgment. We share a quiet, knowing smile. We sip the wine, letting the rich, complex notes settle on our palates. We watch the city that never sleeps secure in the knowledge that we hold the keys to our own fortress. Society pushes a dangerous and pervasive narrative regarding blood relations. We are conditioned from childhood to believe that sharing genetic material creates an unbreakable, eternal contract. We are told to forgive repeated transgressions, to turn the other cheek, and to offer endless grace because family is supposed to be a sacred bond. My journey through the dark underbelly of suburban greed proved that narrative is a fabricated trap. Blood does not grant anyone a sovereign right to exploit your labor. It does not provide a free pass to mortgage your future or leverage your pristine credit score to fund a criminal fantasy. A true family is not defined by a birth certificate or a shared last name. A genuine family consists of the individuals who stand shoulder to shoulder with you when the financial storms hit. They are the partners who help you build an impenetrable legal defense when the predators start circling your estate. They value your intellect and protect your peace. They do not view your success as a communal bank account waiting to be drained. The ultimate power a person can wield is not an infinite capacity to endure suffering. It is not the ability to swallow insults at a holiday dinner just to keep the peace. True unadulterated power is the tactical awareness to recognize a parasitic relationship. It is the profound courage to stand up, push your chair back, and walk out the door without a shred of hesitation. You set a boundary so rigid that no amount of guilt or manipulation can ever breach the wall. You let the exploiters drown in the very ocean of debt they created. You lock the vault, you secure your crown, and you never look back. Thank you for following this journey of financial retribution and personal liberation. If you have ever faced the difficult task of severing ties with toxic relatives to protect your own future, share your story in the comments below. Your resilience is your greatest asset. Hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about reclaiming your worth, outsmarting the system, and building an empire on your own terms. Remember, your peace is expensive. Never let anyone force you to pay for their mistakes.